Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. It's the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humsley Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar.
Hello,
and
lady.
unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's Plank of the Week, he's got a sizable plank.
Yes. And apparently,
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning and a happy Friday to you wherever you are in the country. The forecast looks good. What positive news going into the weekend? Let's start off on a happy note, shall we? Because there's not much else in the news to be happy about. Is there ever? You know what they say, good news isn't news at all. But I'm going to be taking you through the lot of it. News and views, and I'm going to try as well to chase away those blues up until 1 o'clock today. And I'd love it if you got involved and let me know your thoughts and feelings on all of the stories we're going to be talking about today. And there's a lot going on out there. I mean, apparently children now need to be taught to show some grit. Here's some advice. Don't bother teaching them anything. Just stop pandering to their every need. That's how that sort of naturally develops as an instinct. And Rupert Lowe, he's been around all the studios, hasn't he? He's been doing the news agents. He's been doing the Daily Telegraph podcast. And me being me, out of journalistic curiosity and no more than that, have been reading all the comments underneath. And quite eye-opening they are too. And the plot thickens when it comes to David Lammy and Taxigate. That's right. Apparently, our Foreign Secretary, which is basically our chief diplomat, basically said the effing French and was yelling at this geezer. I don't know who was right and who was wrong, but the Sun have managed to get exclusive photos of what the back of that taxi looks like. And all I can say, he's not exactly a clean traveller, that's for sure. I'm beginning to think that there's more to this than meets the eye. Right, if you want to comment on anything that we are discussing today, 03444 99 1000 is the number to call if you'd like to register your interest to get involved, and then the lovely Alicia will give you a call back as and when the moment is ripe. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp that I can play out to the adoring audience. 87222 is the number to send me a text message, but you have to write the word talk before you write the rest of your message, because there's a gazillion studios in Talk Towers and not all of them belong to us. And if you don't write that word, it kind of ends up going to the wrong place, and someone next door who's reading out Premiership football results will start banging on about Rupert Lowe and won't know what on earth's going on. Well, maybe they think it'll be a story about Southampton Football Club. Who knows? And we are on X at talkTV. OK, shall we crack on then? And I'm pleased to say I am joined by one of my favourites. Not biased because he's from Gloucester, but it does tend to make people very cool indeed. It's James Price, former government advisor for the Conservative Party. Good morning, my baba.
It is very rare that I get to be called cool, so I will take that. Thank you ever so much.
I'm making a pilgrimage down the M4 to our hinterlands this evening. You'll be pleased to know.
Quite right.
Right, let's talk about children need to be taught to show some grit. And this is to tackle a growing mental health crisis in schools. Apparently the Labour government are going to set up extra attendance and behaviour hubs. I mean, what are they? Surely an attendance and behaviour hub is just a classroom. You're supposed to go to it, otherwise you're playing truant, and then you're supposed to behave in it. What are these things supposed to be?
It's a very good question. Hub seems to be a kind of amazing government buzzword in the last few years, right? And it's a sort of place-based version of a Quango. Like, let's just set up a hub and see what happens. And I think that it's there instead of actually decent, proper policies. We've had through the COVID pandemic a real problem of behaviour going down, of attendance going down as well. And we've seen a lot of people with, so to say, mental health problems. And rather than saying, right, come on, just sort yourself out, get a bit of sunshine, have a decent night's sleep, read a nice book, get off your damn phone, we'll say, oh, you poor thing, and you look for medication or you look for deeper underlying reasons. And you start thinking, oh, well, maybe this kid is trans and maybe they identify as a horse, so we should take them outside for a canter. That's a real story, by the way, that happened with one kid.
What?
Really?
Oh, yeah,
a child identified as a horse and had to be taken around the school playing field for a canter occasionally.
Oh, my...
I agree that child did have mental health problems, but it wasn't...
Well, I think the people taking him for a canter has the mental health problems, frankly speaking.
Absolutely right. And so it's no surprise then that with all of this going on, that we've got a situation where there are children who think they have problems. And again, if you pander to people and say, you know what, actually, you're right, you are the different gender or something, and you should chop your bits off as a result of it, then that isn't going to improve things, and nor is the attitude that extends to other forms of behaviour. So whilst I agree that grit is a good thing, I don't think that the Labour government is the vehicle that's best going to put this about. And if Bridget Phillipson, who is the Education Secretary, if she really did actually care about children's well-being, why is she going through with some of the most destructive reforms to education that we've seen in this country in several generations? So at the moment, England and Northern Ireland, who do a different system to Wales and Scotland, are the best schools in the West and the best they've ever been based on all the international rankings. And Bridget Phillipson is busily trying to destroy all of those things to appease the trade union bosses because she thinks she can get their money and succeed Keir Starmer. So if she really cared about kids, why is she doing all of that?
I mean, I do despair of what I hear reported about young people these days. A lot of it's got to come down to parenting. But like you said, a lot of it, I think, comes down to just get off the blimmin' phone. That isn't your life. That's not reality. That is some fantastical avatar. Stop trying to get affirmation from sticking things online to try and get as many thumbs up as possible. Go out and play, scrape knees, climb trees, get on with it. Perhaps it's the parents who need to go to parenting school. Let's talk about Rupert Lowe, who was lying low, let's say, for a while and seems to have burst back onto the political platform, doing various interviews, one with the Telegraph podcast, one with the news agents. In fact, we can actually hear a clip of him speaking to Emily Maitlis. Let's have a listen.
He's not fit to be Prime Minister. He's running a cult. He's surrounded by lightweight people whose idea of policy is to wander down to the Marquis of Granby and have a pint and then come up with some sort of press conference the following day. I could join the Tory party tomorrow, I think.
Have they made overtures to you?
I could join them. I mean, look, I talk to all of them all the time, and I think some of them are very good people. And as I say, there's some extremely able young Tories who I think share a Tory agenda.
Mm. What did you watch either of those interviews, James? What did you make of it?
I tried my best to get through the Emily Maitlis interview, and I'm afraid I found her tone and her smugness and her being totally incorrect on the facts and yet still being extremely arrogant. I found it I was actually unable to get through the clips of it that I could see. And you and I may disagree on some of this, I'm afraid, Alex. Probably one of the first times we'll ever disagree on anything. But I think that Rupert Lowe has been very, very shoddily treated by his former party. You cannot go around accusing somebody of having dementia when they don't, which is what certain figures seem to have done. It's just an absolutely horrendous thing to do. And also, I think that, and I've got a lot of time for the Reform Party, a lot of sympathy with a lot of what they're trying to do. If you are the sort of self-appointed anti-woke and anti-stupid HRification of Britain party, to then try and go down legal means and the kind of legal letters and the sort of weasel words about him that they did, it just behooves a party that doesn't, to me, yet seem ready for the strictures of big government. If you can't keep...
But what do you make of Rupert Lowe, though? Because, you know, I actually do agree with some of your criticisms of Reform. I thought the handling of that fallout was pretty abysmal. I mean, you know, just from a strategic PR point of view, it was a disaster. You don't wash your dirty laundry in public. First rule of politics, if you have a spat, keep it behind closed doors. But he is there sort of saying, I can join the Conservatives at any point. He said in another interview, I might set up my own party. And do you know what I got from reading comments on The Telegraph, which most of the readers of The Telegraph are very Reform sympathetic. And so underneath the podcast, I thought, well, I'm going to load the comment section and go through all of them. And if that was a poll on favourability of whether they liked what Rupert had said, whether they disliked what he said, I don't think it had worked, because a lot of people are going, whoa, this guy is coming across as pretty up himself. This guy keeps attacking his former party relentlessly rather than talking about any sort of positive political vision. And a lot of people are kind of think, just, you know, shut up and get on with being the MP for Great Yarmouth and stop slinging mud at Farage and Reform.
I think that if I were in Rupert Lowe's position and I had been elected as a Member of Parliament and I was gung-ho behind trying to make Nigel Farage Prime Minister, which Rupert was, and I was driving a huge amount of the policy agenda and deep thinking and real work and all the rest, as it seems to me that Rupert Lowe was doing, and then they came after me in this kind of hatchet job you just described, I'd be pretty angry as well. I mean, they tried to get they got the police involved. So they tried to deprive him of his liberty. He talked yesterday about how armed coppers turned up at his house at almost midnight and confiscated his shotguns, as he's a farmer, and smeared his name everywhere. I think I'd be pretty angry too. And I think it would give me a dim sense of the sorts of people who did that, especially if they're attempting to run the country. And I worry that if you can't keep a party of 5 MPs together, and you can't keep talented people like Rupert Lowe on side, and he's obviously a proper person who's run big organisations and has the sort of skill set you need in government, frankly, the civil service are going to make mincemeat of you if this is all you're doing, and then you spend the rest of the time talking about woke condiments or whatever it is that Lee Anderson talks about. I think it's such a tragedy, because Reform could have started, and I speak to friends who are entrepreneurs who joined the Reform Party for a bit, saw what happened to Rupert Lowe and think, God, you know, I'm not getting involved in that. And I think that means that although we're a long way out from the general election, whereas before Lowe's defenestration, I actually thought that Reform were on for a majority, and I don't think that's the case as time goes on.
Interesting indeed. I mean, to me, there just seems to be no winners from all of it. I'm a big fan of Rupert. I think he's very capable, but I'd rather wish he'd just sort of quietly get on with work now.
The winner, by the way, would be Starmer if we don't get some kind of agreement either between Reform and the Conservatives, or whatever happens there. Whatever happens, we need to make sure that this ghastly bunch of socialists...
Right. Well, this is it. This is exactly what I'm saying. It's why I think that however badly you might be treated by a place is rather unedifying, and it doesn't always work out well strategically to be seen as just sort of, you know, mired in bitterness, however justified it may or may not be. I just don't think it's a particularly good look. And just looking at the comments under The Telegraph, that's what a lot of people seem to be saying. They were like, look, I like you, but can you just wind your neck in a bit, stop going about bashing Reform, we still want to vote for this party. It's just, you know, it's having an awareness really of how things are coming across, and that's not to say I'm going to take any particular side. Like I said, there's blame on both sides in this argument, and the way it was all handled, I think, was, well, clearly it wasn't done in a very sensible or professional way. Some quite sort of eyebrow-raising tactics were used, but it doesn't seem to be actually really harming reform at present. Let's move on now and talk about... this is absolutely ridiculous. The security impact of people coming across the channel on small boats, arriving in Britain, who are not actually having full police checks. They're not even being questioned by officials. This is a damning report by Watchdog, which has expressed surprise and concern that most organised people trafficking gangs are treated as low priority and are not being actively investigated. Only 1 in 15 migrants are quizzed about their contact with smugglers. I mean, who on earth have we got coming into this country? Because I'll tell you what, when you see some of these young men getting off boats doing that pointing upstairs to Allah and all the rest of it, I have to wonder who they're connected to, and you have to question who these gangs are connected to. And apparently, far from smashing the gangs, we're just letting them get on with it. At what point are we going to have someone who's come over in one of those boats, or multiple people who've come over in those boats, committing atrocities on our soil?
Yeah, you said it. Far from smashing the gangs, all that Starmer's managed to do is smash their record profits, right? You say that these people, and you mentioned the word lads, right? And they are almost all male. When you are fleeing war, just people at home, if you were in a war-torn country and you wanted to get out, you look over your wife or your husband and your kids. Do you take them with you? You do, right? If you're going to war, what do? Do you take them with you? No, you leave them behind. And so I think we have to think very carefully about the sorts of people and the makeup we've got coming over here in the first place. And the fact, as you say, that we're not checking these people is completely bonkers. And having just bashed reform a little bit, to praise Nigel Farage, he raised this most important of questions in Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday. The fact that when the Iranian terrorists were arrested 2 weeks ago now in that big sting operation, at least one of them came over as a bogus asylum seeker, perhaps more, right? And so it is completely crackers that we don't know about this. And it's led me, I'm afraid, I think, not 100% convinced of this yet, but I think that we need, perhaps even just for a time-limited period, some form of digital ID card or something like that, because there are now so many damn people in this country. We don't know who they are. We don't know anything about them. They're able to access huge amounts of benefits. They're able to move around with complete impunity. We don't know their background. Lots of them pretend that they're 17, and we end up putting blokes who are bigger and hairier and uglier than me in bloody classrooms next to young girls, and just completely ludicrous things like this. And I think we've got to get a grip, or we won't have much of a country left by the end of this.
You're right, and you know, I have it from a source under sort of strict confidentiality that a third-party nation has contacted the UK saying, we think hundreds of jihadi trainers have come into your country via small boats. That should send a chill down anyone's spine. This is national security. We should declare a state of emergency and use those particular powers to evade some other onerous legislation which is preventing us turning boats around, and get on with doing that, because I am terrified about what is being shipped into this country. If just one person dies at the hands of someone who's broken into this country connected to a terrorist organisation, the government has blood on their hands. Let's talk now about the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy. Front page of The Sun, they seem to have the exclusive. They've got hold of this French taxi driver, Nassim Mimoun, who claims that Mr. Lammy yelled at him, refused to pay money after taking an all-night, overnight taxi. And there you go. Apparently he yelled effing French. There's photographs as well of what the back of the taxi looks like, which, whilst it's not, you know, horrific, but it's pretty untidy and scruffy. There's packets and rubbish just chucked all over the floor, apple cores, paper napkins, sugar sachets, sandwich packets. I mean, at the very least, this doesn't really look like particularly professional diplomatic behaviour by Mr. Lammy, although who's at fault here is still unclear.
Right. I mean, I saw the picture in the back of the car first, and it is incredibly embarrassing to think that a British representative, let alone, as you say, the top diplomat, the foreign secretary, would leave anybody's car like that. You know, like putting your feet up in someone's front room. It's just completely wrong. Then, of course, I saw what he'd said on the front page of The Sun, and I thought, you know, all is forgiven, right? We've got Agincourt now, we've got the 100 Years' War, Trafalgar and Waterloo, and now David Lammy continuing that great diplomatic tradition of attacking the French. It is, obviously, to be serious, really unprofessional. I do think there is a kind of slightly dull technocratic answer, which is that whilst the government is incredibly happy to spaff huge amounts of billions, hundreds of billions of pounds of taxpayers' money in waste all the time in all sorts of areas, we are really weirdly penny pinching when it comes to moving senior ministers around. You know, Trump has Air Force One, the French president has all sorts of fabulous ways of travelling, and yet the Foreign Secretary, after a diplomatic engagement with His Majesty the King and the state visit in Italy, then has to get a taxi somewhere. I mean,
well, it seems to me though, he's getting a taxi for his own personal holiday reasons. It doesn't seem to me he's taking some sort of taxi to go to another, you know, foreign affairs meeting.
Yeah, I think that's right. But at the same time, he is the Foreign Secretary and represents the United Kingdom. And although I think that as a man, he's in, well, be careful with my choice of words, not terribly bright, people should go and look up his Celebrity Mastermind performance.
Yeah.
He said that the king who followed Henry VIII was Henry VII, and other very embarrassing answers. It's about protecting the dignity of the office of the chief diplomat of His Majesty's government. And I think, therefore, that we should actually try and have a bit more dignity in these things. And the idea of, you know, seeing any minister sat in the back of a Ryanair flight or something where the lowest administrator in other countries gets a huge motorcade or whatever, yeah. I do think that we should get the politics out of it. And, you know, maybe when Nigel Farage as Prime Minister gets himself a big gold jumbo jet to fly around in.
Well, yeah, exactly, from Qatar. What a beautiful-looking machine that is. James, thank you ever so much. Always lovely catching up with you, my darling. Right, what do you think about all of this? What do you think about David Lammy's behaviour? I mean, it's still unclear to me whether the taxi drivers, like, you know, being a bit of a con artist and trying to overcharge him and sort of, you know, has all the possessions in the car and saying, go on, give me an extra €700, and whether, therefore, the taxi driver's totally wrong, or whether Mr. Lammy is being rather sloppy, and certainly his reaction doesn't seem to be particularly professional, beholden of a man of such a significant office in this nation. Let me know your thoughts on anything we're talking about, because we're going to be speaking to some of you after the break. 0344499 1000 is the number to call, charged at your normal network rate. You can use that number as well to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number to text. Remember to write the word talk before your message. I'll see you on the other side.
I just challenge anyone to look at these lists, and they're published, I think, basically sort of every term, every academic term, and they're all the same from Lincoln's Inn from the last couple of years. You cannot look down that list and not think that there is something a little skewed going on here. And Lincoln's Inn, you know, has made good efforts on diversity, equality and inclusion, but I must say that I'm not sure that much more energy needs to be put into that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, let's do some of your messages and then take some of your calls. Gary says James is showing his Tory bias. Reform are going from strength to strength on the ground. Even since Rupert made his big announcement a couple of days ago, the membership has grown above 1,000 new members. He needs to get out into the shires more. Good morning, Alex. Look at Rupert Lowe's Facebook page and those comments. I'm afraid I don't have a Facebook account to do that, so I don't know whether or not that is suggesting he's got many adoring fans on Facebook or the contrary. And then someone else said, Alex, you're so wrong on the Rupert Lowe issue. Your loyalty to Farage is clouding your normally good judgment. Reform lost my vote because of Farage and Youssef. Well, look, whoever sent that, all I can say is I know all the characters involved and I've spoken to all the characters involved on this. This isn't about loyalty. It's just about me saying, look, I think there was blame on both sides, quite frankly. I don't think that Rupert necessarily behaved in a collegiate manner, putting things in the press. And I'd heard reports that other people had sort of suggested there'd already been some difficulties simmering behind the scenes. I wasn't there. I don't know. But similarly, at the same time, you know, the response, that press statement and phoning police and all the rest of it was, well, I mean, I don't know. I staggered when it happened. I was rather agog. So just a messy situation. But one thing is quite clear, though, looking at the local election results and recent polling, it hasn't really dented the party's popularity or actually put any sort of ripple in their momentum. So we'll have to see how it all plays out. I just want everyone to shut up and get along. You're grown adults, for crying out loud. Stop griping, stop bitching, stop being bitter. Put the country first, would you? Let's talk about a positive vision for this nation and what we want to do to make it a better place. Let's speak now to David, who's in Gloucestershire. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Alex. How are we all?
Yeah, fine, very well. Coming back to the hinterlands a bit later today, David. Can't wait.
Good. Yeah, lovely. I just wanted to say with this Rupert Lowe, Farage, reform argument, and I actually joined Reform last year, and I went to one of the meetings in the Forest of Dean, and I was getting all excited, and I did vote Reform in the council elections, because I really feel we've got to send a message out to the, back to the buggers. Well, sorry, I shouldn't swear, but you know what I mean. It's back to this government and tell them what we think about them. But I am just absolutely in despair with this whole argument. Is there no politicians with any moral compass or no political party?
Yeah, it's this thing that politicians now do, and it all sort of started during the Brexit vote, when there was a lack of party discipline. Everyone was just running away to put things in newspapers, slag off the leaders, moan about policy, put out the propaganda or the policies of their particular faction. And unfortunately, in politics, people are always going to disagree. Passions run very highly. It's very hard to get two people to agree on a manifesto, let alone, hundreds of people. But it's a team sport. Unfortunately, being in politics is a team sport, and there just doesn't seem to be common sense from anybody at the moment when it comes to just sort of handling this issue. Why on earth couldn't they just get together and break bread rather than keep throwing accelerant onto what started off as a burning little ember and then became a full-blown brazier fire? I mean, it was just maddening to watch.
Well, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, me and my wife at the moment, we're having a huge row because obviously there's talk of the Conservatives bring Boris back. I think he's a lunatic, but my wife thinks he's the best thing since sliced bread. But that's between us, and she said, oh, well, we've got to agree to disagree. Well, we have to, but that's the thing. Why didn't they just sit down, right? When this all started off, why didn't they sit down and say, right, come on then, there's only five of them, or, plus all the other bits and pieces. Why didn't they all just go to a pub and have a meal and just say, right, come on, we're not leaving this room until it's sorted.
This is what you've got to wonder. I think there's, again, blame to be apportioned on both sides in this. I know at one point Rupert was very desperate for that to happen and the shutters had been pulled down, but I don't know what happened in the lead up to that moment. I have no idea what has necessarily gone on internally. It's not particularly edifying. But like I said, it's life, people fall out. If you hear of some of the spats in the Conservative Party behind the scenes, and actually, of course, remember how they behaved, not even behind the scenes, but very openly in public, changing leaders every 5 seconds. Parties that don't fight tend to do very well. The Labour Party, who managing to convey a sense of cohesion after those pretty tumultuous momentum years, ended up getting a massive majority simply because they didn't do anything to scupper their chances. And I just wish that, women wouldn't do this nonsense. When do you ever open, I'm not making this a gender thing, but when do you ever open a newspaper and find out some female MP has gone on like a sort of blabbermouth ranting rage about the party and the leader? And I think it's always the boys. It's always the public school boys, I tell you. If it was down the Forest of Dean, you'd be down the pub, might have a fisticuffs, pat each other on the back and go for a flagon of cider. Sort things out properly. David, thank you very much. I'm actually going to be in the Forest of Dean, so I might even see you there. You never know. Right, let's speak to Georgina, who's in London. Good morning, Georgina.
Good morning, Alex. I'm listening to all this about the migrant crisis, darling, and let me tell you, I am absolutely seething at the moment. This is a ridiculous situation that these people are coming over on these boats, all these young men. The government need to stop letting them in. The British public do not want them here. Now, I can't be any more clear than that. And let me tell you, I think the majority of this country feels the same. We are keeping them, we are housing them, we are feeding them, we are wiping their bottoms quite literally. And to be honest with you, my darling, I am totally sick of it. My husband works himself to death, and half of his wages is taken to keep these immigrants coming over. They are giving us the finger when they're getting off the boat. They are totally swaggering, and I don't want them here at all. I'm totally fed up with it, Alex. I watched PMQs yesterday, and they hardly spoke about it. Now, let me give all these parties a little bit of advice. Deal with this migrant crisis, get these people out of our country, stop these boats from coming over, and you will get our vote. It's as simple as that, because we, as a British public, have had enough.
Georgina, I think that basically speaks on behalf of every single person listening to this show. I can hear how angry you are. You have every right to be. This is our nation. Our nation deserves to be protected. Our money pays for the UK Border Force. Our money pays for politicians. We're supposed to be represented. Why on earth are there people from other countries breaking in and being given free accommodation in 4-star hotels in the private rental sector when other people can't even get on the housing ladder or get social housing, can't get a dentist appointment unless you come over the channel on a dinghy? And yeah, we're taxed to the hilt, and people are fed up, and quite rightly so. And what you just said, Georgina, about some of them getting off the boat swaggering, you're absolutely right. They don't look like poor, bruised, battered, war-torn, impoverished, starving, woe-begotten victims. No, far from it. They're all putting their TikTok videos up, doing all the like, ooh, yeah, gangster music, like, yeah. I mean, seriously, I'm with you. That was the best moment of communal catharsis I've had in a long time. Round of applause to Georgina. I bet a lot of people listening then was going, yes, you get in there. Right, after that, let's take a little cool off, shall we? Have a little short break, and we're going to be discussing someone else who got very angry at one point and wrote something on social media that they have lived to regret. We're talking about Lucy Connolly. It's been her appeal ongoing at the moment to see if she can get her sentence reduced, possibly even get let out of prison. I think a lot of people listening to this will be behind that. We're going to be catching up with Laurie Wastall, who is the associate editor of The Daily Sceptic, after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. And I'm really keen to get this story covered because it means a heck of a lot to me. I can't tell you how emotionally engaged I've become with the case of Lucy Connolly. The more that I learn, the more disgusted, horrified and harrowed I am, quite frankly, that this poor woman is languishing in prison for 32 months. A 12-year-old daughter has no access to her. She's not allowed visitation rights to be let out to go see her family, even at Christmas, on her birthday, things like that. Her husband's not very well. She used to be a childminder, for crying out loud. A picture of a community pillar who'd never put a foot wrong, went through horrible suffering herself when her own child died due to negligence. And then when she saw what had happened to those 3 wee babbers, those 3 little girls in Southport, and she just thought of the parents and the life of suffering those parents are going to have from losing a child, and it got right into her sternum, right into her gut. And so in a fit of being really angry, she writes something on social media about burning down migrant hotels and politicians and the government and all the treacherous people who have allowed this sort of thing to happen. Then after that, she was writing post after post after post saying, come on, people, why on earth is there rioting? This is... I mean, to me, it's a closed, open and closed case. You look at it and go, she wrote something stupid, but she's a law-abiding citizen. Just tell her, don't write something like that in future, the end. For Lucy Connolly, just being taken to a police station is probably scary enough, let alone being detained in a cell where you're not allowed bail, you didn't have access to proper legal advice, you're told to plead guilty, and then find yourself in a prison for 32 months. This is not just completely disproportionate to the so-called crime committed. I don't think they even proved a crime was committed. They weren't able to string together causal evidence to say that what she wrote then led people to go out and do what they did on the streets. There wasn't a proper trial at all. And she was made an example of. That's exactly what happened. It was all, all on television. She became a high-profile prisoner. Oh, they can't let her out now because she's too high-profile. Well, you made her that. Because you've made her an example to scare everybody else, which in my opinion, right, if you're a government who finds someone whose opinions you don't like and then you make an example of them by sticking them in clink to tell everyone else, look, if you do this, this is what's going to happen to you, you're a pretty deranged government. That makes that person a political prisoner, in my opinion. Let's speak to Lucy Wastel now, Associate Editor of the Daily Sceptic, who is following the case. Laurie Wastel. Laurie, I've got your name wrong twice now. First of all, I called you Wastel, which sounded really kind of, sort of Newcastle. And then I called you Lucy. Excuse me, I'm sort of very upset by this story. But tell me, what's going on in that courtroom?
What's going on? Yeah, I mean, it's almost strange that we had a very complex case yesterday at the Court of Appeal, which is an unusual thing in itself for a case like this to go to the Court of Appeal. But as you mentioned there, I think what many of your viewers will find strange about this is that there's the basic case here. There's the moral case of, as you say, why is this law-abiding mum and childminder in prison in the first place for a 31-month sentence for a one intemperate tweet? And that's kind of the big moral argument that's sitting over this whole thing. But yesterday in court, the question was, it was an appeal over on two grounds about her sentence. And so, well, you mentioned that they didn't prove that this had led to any disorder, and that's quite right. That could not really ever be proved. But of course, what happened was she ended up pleading guilty, and so the first part of the appeal, the first ground, was on whether, in fact, she was ill-advised to plead guilty to the level of culpability that she had in fact done. And so there was actually a lot of another quite unusual thing. Cross-examination of her own solicitor, her original solicitor, who, her appeal was making the case that she essentially had been somewhat poorly advised, or perhaps not quite at least understood what it was that she was pleading guilty to. And this is a sort of a bit of a technical point, but I'll just take you through it. There are two levels of culpability roughly in this offence that she did end up pleading guilty to, which is stirring up racial hatred, and one is intending to do that, and one is doing something that's likely to do that. And she maintained throughout the day yesterday, and as you said as well, she, in the days afterwards, she was telling people not to riot. She had never ever intended to incite violence. And indeed, it was only 3.5 hours after she posted the tweet that she took it down. And yes, as you say, she was posting other things. And even in the tweet itself, this was looked into quite a lot. She has that addendum to it. Yes, she says, it's awful, appalling things set fire to the hotels. But she says, for all I care. And so it's not actually a direct incitement. This is the case that was being made. It was just an expression of rage because, as you say, she felt particularly strongly about it, having lost a child herself. And so really her defense feels that she should not have, and didn't really understand that she was pleading guilty to intending to, and that this led to her being treated much more harshly at sentencing, which is the other ground.
I mean, what I don't understand is, for me, it's just very clearly, we've all got emotional intelligence. We can all empathise to some degree with people and making mistakes and sort of losing your rag at times. And we've all written ill-advised things on social media, I have no doubt. And to me, you would assume that when it comes to our legal system in a civilised country with human rights, that you would hope some logic was applied, and that normally the police would go, look, you know, that was really bad, you took it down, don't ever do that again, because you don't know if someone is going to read that and go and take it the wrong way. That was enough. That was enough to me, and I think it strikes fear into the heart of the general public that the legal system can be this megalomaniacal, quite frankly, this overbearing when it comes to what is a human, all too human moment of passion and a mistake. And I think personally that is what it was supposed to do. It was supposed to strike fear into the hearts of the public. What's going to happen next with this? Because this goes on, we don't know what the verdict's going to be. What are the chances, do you think, that on appeal they're going to look at this and find reason enough to say, right, we're going to reduce your sentence, even let you out? Or is it now a situation that because they have decided to do this so publicly, to make an example of a woman so unscrupulously, that if they row back on it now, there's going to be some serious questions asked?
Well, it is very hard to say. So, yeah, usually the Court of Appeal would actually reply immediately, but because they were hearing actually lots of factual details, they had to say, no, we've got to retire and give a written judgment, they say, as soon as possible. So there is, it's hard to say, obviously, but, I was in court yesterday, of course, and the atmosphere seemed fairly favourable, perhaps, to some of the arguments that were being made, at least, by the defence. And so, I mean, on that, there's all this issue of this thing with the solicitor, and I think you're right. They may not be very minded to really put a lot of blame on Lucy's original solicitor, because this would sort of implicate the justice system more broadly, perhaps, in a way. But what they might do is look at the sentence. And you mentioned the lack of logic there. One of the things that was used by the judge sentencing her to make her offence more aggravated was that it was a particularly sensitive social climate. Now, this was obviously true in the days that followed when riots had taken place. But Lucy posted this on the night of the Southport attack, immediately after, in this distraught moment. There had been no riots at this point. So, they were really... They got there. It could not possibly have. She could not have known it was a sensitive social climate. There's not always riots when a tragedy like this happened, but there's a lack, and there are a few other points as well in the sentencing remarks that were really, combed over by the appeal by Adam King, that the barrister paid for by the Free Speech Union, who did a fantastic job yesterday, I should say. But so it seems perhaps possible that they will take a few months off her sentence, and that's certainly what we're hoping for. Yeah, it's not enough. That woman shouldn't be in prison. That is my personal view. I think it's absolutely a stain on our nation's otherwise proud legal history that poor woman is in prison for as long as she is. Laurie, thank you ever so much for bringing us that information. Do join us again to let us know when the verdict comes through. We're going to take a short break now. Look, if you want to give me your opinion, do you think that Lucy Connolly deserved to be sent to prison because of the stridency of what she said, actually talking about setting fire to hotels? Or do you think actually, do you know what, we live in a world where it's quite clear she wasn't actually there on Telegram instructing groups of gangsters to go about and, put dustbins, blazing dustbins in the doorways of, migrant hotels? That we've all said things when we're angry that we might later come to regret, but we don't expect to be put in prison for almost 3 years. Let me know your thoughts. 03444 99 1000. You can send me a WhatsApp on that number as well, or leave me a voice note, 87222, if you want to send me a text message. Remember to write the word talk before you smuzz, and I'll see you after this.
Albanian prisoners and criminals are, a significant number of them in UK jails. A lot of them have been sent back. They did strike a deal with Albania. The last government, Rishi Sunak had. So 95% of the Albanians who crossed over do get sent back automatically now because essentially they have a deal that if you are Albanian and you land in Britain, you try to claim asylum or you try to come here, you just get sent back to Albania immediately, which is a very effective deterrent. And actually numbers of Albanians crossing illegally into the UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Now, you must have been living under a rock if you hadn't heard all of the warnings about Chinese involvement in critical infrastructure. They wanted to build our 5G network, but an intelligence briefing document from Five Eyes, which is the joint intelligence operation between all of the sort of Western Anglosphere, warned very much that you cannot have China involved in critical infrastructure because they might do things that enable them to listen in, take control, sabotage. This warning has come out again and again and again and again for well over a decade, and not just in the UK, but from our counterparts in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, America. We had to bin that 5G contract that Boris Johnson had signed with Huawei and then had to quickly rescind on when he actually bothered to read the security briefing that landed on his desk at the same day. Also, we've had to sort of reduce the amount that they're involved with helping create critical infrastructure such as nuclear power stations. But oh no, old Ed Zero with his ukulele down the wind farm field has been going over to Beijing every 5 seconds with giant charity checks to buy bits and bobs for his climate change zealousy. And it turns out that apparently Chinese kill switches have been found hidden in America solar farms, which is prompting calls for Ed Miliband to now halt the rollout of renewables. I mean, what are kill switches? That sounds pretty scary stuff. Well, it doesn't actually mean you press a button and you actually blow people up, aka, walkie-talkies and Hezbollah. But it does mean that you can essentially turn off parts of the grid. You can actually go, right, we're going to prevent that from feeding into the network. And if you suddenly end up, if on a really sunny day, you have a whole load of power coming from solar panels because they're munching up that sunshine, and then all of a sudden, after a big power surge, it just gets cut off, do you know what happens? Spain. Blackouts. That's what happens. So this, to me, seems pretty darn alarming. Well, let's speak to Andrew Montford, who's Deputy Director of Net Zero Watch. I mean, Andrew, I'm opposed to paper in our green and pleasant land, which we should be using for arable purposes, with a load of Chinese-manufactured silicon plates that probably will barely contribute anything to our grid because we only have sunny days about 1/3 of the year. But what they found in America suggests that actually all of the worst fears about Chinese involvement in critical infrastructure have essentially been proven to be true.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. I mean, I think we've had the impression for a long time that critical infrastructure like wind and solar farms are a risk. It's not an issue, I think, that has really been in the public consciousness. But, we've always imagined that, people might go and cut the cable to an offshore wind farm. The Russians have these submarines that can have cable cutting capabilities. But the Chinese, I guess, are a little bit cleverer, aren't they? They just do it remotely and electronically, and they can just switch off. I think the point you made, that essentially they could cause a Spanish-style blackout, is the important one. It's not as if they need to switch off every wind farm or every solar panel in the country. They just need to switch off enough to destabilize the grid, and our grid is increasingly unstable, and yes, that could then lead to the whole thing being wiped out. So
who's to say, actually? We still don't fully understand what happened in Spain. They sort of said, oh, this might be a cyber attack, and then couldn't seem to evidence it. What we do understand is because of the differing levels of power surges going through the system, it then blew the whole lot up. Thankfully, they managed to restore it, and thankfully, the Spanish didn't go tonto and started kicking in shop windows, which after 24 hours of blackout in London, it's going to be lootsville.com. Every single Foot Locker in the country would find itself needing a glazier the next next day. But I'm worried, actually, that we haven't had the revelations of what actually went on in Spain. Perhaps they should be looking at where they got their solar panels from.
It's an interesting point. I hadn't thought of that one. Yeah, I mean, it could be. I think there does seem to be a story that I think they do have a good idea of what the initial fault was. People seem to be pointing at some unusual weather conditions that essentially made the cables flap about, if you like, in the air, and then they got a short circuit that caused the fault. Faults happen on grids all the time. The problem that the Spanish had is that their grid, like ours, is very unstable because it's full of renewables. And so that small fault then led to a nationwide blackout. So that is the problem that I think we should really be worried about. We're never going to stop every single fault on a grid. But when you have a foreign power that can essentially cause faults on your grid, you're in a very, very exposed position. And I think that is something that, questions need to be asked in Parliament about this, as to, have we just ignored the national security implications of the renewables revolution, if you like? And, all the other sort of, downsides of the renewables revolution have been ignored completely. So yeah, it wouldn't be surprising if the national security angle has not been ignored as well.
The fact they're buying all this stuff from Beijing, probably from factories with forced labour, I think suggests that they probably have been failing to do due diligence on their on the provenance of some of the windworms and the solar panels that Miliband seems to be buying up. How suitable is solar for this country anyway? Because you look out the window today, beautiful clear sky over London. What a gorgeous vista I have from my peephole in Talk Towers. But more often than not, when you're flying into the UK from abroad, you're about to enter our islands because it's just carpeted in thick cloud normally.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think to myself, swathes of farmers' fields, land that should be used, frankly, for either raising cattle, growing crops, or rewilding, if you really wanted to help the environment, is instead covered in nasty silicon, which is made in a country that pumps out as much carbon as they want. So regardless of what you think about climate change, it doesn't seem to me to come to any sort of net zero anyway. And I just think with I can't see. I can understand making fields and fields of solar panels in Morocco, right? I've been to Morocco plenty of time. There's a lot of land there that just can't be farmed because it is dry. It's next to the desert and there's not enough irrigation. So fine, whacking a load of solar panels there where it's guaranteed sunshine seems like a good idea. On our funny little island, which is obsessed with weather because it changes every 5 seconds, I just can't see that this machinery is in any way suitable to us.
Yeah, there's been some studies actually to assess each country's suitability for solar power, and we are, if not the very bottom, we are actually the second bottom. There is only one country in the world that's worse than the UK for solar power, and that's Ireland. So yeah, it's pretty poor in the UK. The issue is that, of course, you can get these solar panels really quite cheaply now because they're made by slave labour in China. And also the Chinese do have this sort of general tactic of underpricing things to try and get market share. So we're living in a false economy, if you like, because what people are paying for solar panels is not the true cost, and let alone taking into account the moral, ethical, and national security downsides. So yeah, they are going to keep going in, and this is the problem that we face at the moment. Until we get somebody sensible in corridors of power who is just going to say, look, we really shouldn't be doing this. The farmland thing is another national security angle in a way, isn't it?
It is. I say this all the time.
Yeah.
We only produce 60% of the food we eat, which is a similar ratio to the outbreak of World War II. And guess what happened? We had to dig for victory. All of a sudden, we didn't have food to eat. Everyone had to have ration books. Although we're a pretty obese country, it might do us some good. But actually, if you want to look at what the direction of travel is for a lot of countries when it comes to farming, China is having a massive push to make sure that they create 100% of all of their food. They're going hard and fast down the line of self-sufficiency, which says to me a lot when it comes to geopolitical intentions, messing about with maritime supply routes. We're an island. If we don't grow our own food and anything happens to the Channel or the Black Sea or the Red Sea or the North Sea or the Irish Sea, that's it. We're done. It won't take long before our supermarket shelves are empty. It astonishes me. It astonishes me that, you know, this idiot little man with his nasally congested voice goes around saying he wants to save the planet, and his response to doing that is papering over our green and pleasant land with silicon plastic plates, which don't even work.
Yeah.
Oh, Andrew, I
the
despair.
The thing with Ed Miliband is that, you know, he's a fanatic. If you try to understand the logic of what he's doing, you'll get lost. There is no logic. He's a fanatic. He just wants to do net zero, whatever.
Oh, I wish he would do one. That would be my dream. Andrew, thank you ever so much. Thank you for your thoughts. And it's interesting, Andrew said that, you know, if, what we need is leadership. If somebody says we've got to get rid of all these net zero targets, they are strangulating industry. They're weakening our economy. And I can think of one particular party who actually dines out on that sort of manifesto. And I think that Ronald in Windsor wants to talk to us about that particular party. Good morning to you, Ronald.
Good morning, Alex. Yeah, perhaps you could help me. Can you explain or put some sense to why people take the trouble to vote for reform, go to their meetings, and because there's been a spat, say they've lost my vote?
Yeah, I don't know. Look, I don't know. Look, it frustrates me. I don't think that Reform has lost out massively as a result of this really unedifying spat. And I'm not going to sort of, you know, say it was wonderful, it was well handled, that there's, you know, no one's to blame, that everyone should be exonerated. It was a screaming mess. But at the same time, this, you know, you look at what goes on in all political parties, and you have political parties, and you have this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they are the only party that are actually proactive, not reactive.
I mean, Rupert Lowe's criticism have been that they're not as proactive as they should be, that perhaps he wants to go further and faster than they were willing to do, that he's criticised them as well of being very shallow on policy. I mean, I kind of think that any party at this stage in the electoral cycle could be accused of that. You don't write it on the back of a fag packet in 2 seconds. You sit down and properly cost it and research it, which takes time. But
he's being a politician, isn't he, Nigel? He's trying to appeal to a broader church, isn't he, rather than just, you know, going for, you know, the moon.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think about both Rupert Lowe and Ben Habib's constant attacks against Nigel the man? Do you think that they've got a point, or do you think it's beginning to look a bit like some bunny boiling bitter ex-girlfriend kind of stuff?
It will all even itself out, is what I think. And just, by the way, one other thing that I wanted to say to you, the two main Muppets in the news at the moment, Starmer and Lammy, it occurred to me that if you join their names together, you get Keir Lamity.
Keir?
Calamity.
A Keir Calamity.
Calamity.
Oh, yeah, I'm trying to do that portmanteau, and I can't quite manage it, to be honest, Ronald. But I love your optimism. I like the fact that you're basically saying that, you know, Reform UK is bigger than this silly spat. I mean, look, these boys need to sort of grow up and stop, you know, fluttering about their issues in public. It doesn't look good on anybody. You know, whether you sympathise with what they're saying or not, just stop banging on. It just sounds a bit ugh after a while, and I wish them all well. I know them all personally, which is what's so frustrating about this. They're all brilliant, competent men. I wish they would just stop throwing their toys out the pram and just help lead this country out of a Labour disaster and into a brighter future. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but when I come back, we're going to be drilling down into politics a little bit more with Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Mr. Freddie Gray. So go put the kettle on, don't take too long, because I am back just after this.
So funny.
We've been talking this morning about a new theme park which is going to be built. The Universal Studios apparently going to build in Bedfordshire. We've been asking many of you to give us some ideas for theme parks. Alison in South Wales says in the new theme park at 5 p.m. every day they could have the PIP parade. All the people driving their brand new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going round that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth for this theme park. So what I do, mate, I shove a £5 in a pot and you can go in and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed, and very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the park's hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. And what about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner. Says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide ride surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed whack the rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it the channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Imagine the Scouts to say you can break into a theme park for free.
Hi, Jeremy. Hey, it's simple. You've got the Labour Ghost Train.
Yeah.
Where everywhere is pitch.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back to the show, and let's have a little deep dive into the politics about today. Well, just when you thought the Labour Party hadn't brought out a really pointless money-wasting policy for a while, we learned today that Bridget Phillipson, writing in The Telegraph, she is, of course, the Education Secretary, and Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, who clearly has solved all the waiting lists, so has some time to talk about, I don't know, the mental health of kids in school, have come up with a genius idea to tackle anxiety and low mood. They're going to create attendance and behaviour hubs. Yeah, no, I don't either. That's exactly what I was thinking. Like, what is that? What? I mean, when I was at school, correct me if I'm wrong, but attendance was what you did by just turning up to the school, and behaviour is what you did in the classroom. Why do you need a separate thing that you have to attend to learn to behave when that is surely just school? I don't know, make it make sense. Let's see if Freddie Gray, Deputy Editor of The Spectator, has any clue about what this is going to involve. Hi, Freddie.
Hello, Alex. I think this is just yet another day, another intervention from this government that is designed to appeal to the Tory press, but ends up just sounding completely vapid and empty, as you suggest. This article is written by Wes Streeting and Bridget Phillipson, and it's just gibberish. I think if I was handed it in as homework, I'd give it an F. We are following proven methods that work, full stop, led by data and guided by best practice, full stop.
What does that mean?
Just managerial gibberish. And this is an attempt to, the headline, which the Telegraph have splashed their news, the newspaper has splashed on this morning, is that they want to bring grit to back towards children. And I think everybody agrees with that idea. Yes, we want our children to be a bit tougher and more resilient and so on. But a lot of the latest research on mental health children shows that actually talking to children about mental health issues is bad for their mental health. So setting up more hubs, if they are to be hubs, in which children get to think about their anxieties and think about what's making them feel blue.
Do you know, I remember seeing a brilliant psychologist one day saying, we overthink all the time. Life is hard. The more you sit there going, I was hurt as a child and I didn't like this and this is the way it makes me feel. You know, it's amazing that I had a programme the other day about VE Day and people were calling in with their relative stories about the contribution they made to the war effort. And when you think about, you know, there's my grandfather was in hospital and then came out and wanted to go straight back to the front line. My grandfather was 14 years old and lied about his age so he could go and fight. You know, my grandfather was the person who rode around on a bicycle to see what houses had been bombed, and when doodlebugs came over had to like jump and lie in the gutter. And you just think, what have kids got to worry about today other than how many likes they've got on Instagram and stuff like that? I mean, to me, I think it's pretty obvious what we need to do. Get some truancy officers out and about rather than creating these hubs. Make sure kids are going to school, knock on front doors, say to the parents you're going to get fined if this kid isn't at the school gate tomorrow morning 8:30 sharp. Bring in cadet training. You know, that's been posed by various people saying that would do them a world of good. And then potentially also have a look at classroom discipline, because I get the impression teachers are very restricted in the sort of punishments they could mete out.
Well, I mean, I do think there are real concerns about the impact that the internet and screens are having on our children. I think there's real concern, legitimate fears about what's happening to our children's mental health in that respect. But as I said, the studies show that boredom is very important for children. It's very important that children are bored. It's good for their mental health. Stress is good for instilling resilience, because if you learn how to cope with stress at a young age, you're better at coping with it when you're older. And to a certain degree of fear, actually. I think fear of teachers, a sense that you might... anxiety about failure is not necessarily bad for your mental health when you're a child. In fact, it might make you a tougher adult. So actually getting children working and away from screens is the key thing. But there's nothing in this, apart from a sort of one sentence which has the word grit in it, there's nothing in this joint article from Wes Streeting and Bridget Phillipson that suggests that they have any clear idea what to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing in it which suggests this is actually going to give people grit. Instead, it sounds like a load of mumbo-jumbo mollycoddling to me. I want to talk to you about Rupert Lowe. I don't know whether you've caught any of his interviews since his sort of renaissance and his big media blast. He's been speaking to the Telegraph's podcast. He's been doing the newsagents. And I want to get your take on how he's coming across.
Well, I quite admire Rupert Lowe, but I think he is coming across as a bit of a whiner, and he sounds quite sour. I think, obviously, Reform are the ascendant party in British politics at the moment. He's fallen out with them. He's fallen away from them. And he is now talking about rejoining the Tory parties. I mean, the Tory party is facing an existential crisis. I don't think there's any doubt about that. So whether Rupert Lowe will help save them, I'd have some doubts. Or perhaps setting up an independent party. And my response to that would be, good luck with that. I think he is sounding very bitter and angry about Nigel Farage. There's obviously very bad blood there. And I don't think it looks bad on Reform. I think it looks bad on Rupert Lowe.
Yeah, I get the impression now it's sort of tilting in that direction. I was reading comments under the Telegraph article, and there are people going, I like you, I think you're clever, I thought the sort of stuff you were doing was so important. We all thought Reform treated you really badly. But dear God, man, just put a sock in it already. It's now beginning to look a little bit balmy. And it doesn't seem to be harming Reform that much. When you look at the polling, yes, I get messages from people saying I was going to vote Reform, now I'm not. I wonder how such a sort of big internal spat amongst 5 MPs may have dissuaded donors from coming along and giving money, thinking, can the party behave seriously? But certainly when it comes to public opinion, it doesn't seem to have dented their chances too much.
No, they have all the momentum, and they increasingly have a kind of organisational strength, which is what they really needed. But I think where it went wrong for Rupert Lowe, my pet theory on this is that he started getting retweeted by Elon Musk, and that went to his head too much. It made him sort of think of himself as a kind of change figure in Britain. And I think my theory is that anybody who gets retweeted more than once by Elon Musk goes a little bit mad.
I've been retweeted twice by Elon Musk, and I still think I've got my sanity just about in check.
Sorry, I should have said 3 times.
There you go. That's it. I've avoided the third. That's the cursed retweet. But I think you're right. And it's also, we were just talking about kids and mental health and get off the blimmin' phone, would you? Because it's sending you Tonto. And I think, in a way, what you say has a ring of truth to it, because Rupert talks a lot about my social media engagement. Well, that isn't the world. You know, that isn't... Most voters in the country probably aren't even on X. Most votes in the country, when surveyed, even those who are going to vote Reform, don't know who Rupert Lowe is still, because it takes a heck of a long time to build a brand and be a well-known figure in the public eye. It takes years and years and years and years of dedication and sacrifice. And, you know, it's almost like I want to say to Rupert, who I have a great amount of affection for, and I think he is... It's a loss, actually, that, you know, we don't have someone like him in politics in a big and meaningful way on the national stage, because Reform could have really done with that talent. And I think there's a lot of criticism to go towards Reform about the way they handled it. But Rupert, put down the phone. You know, go and spend time in Great Yarmouth, go and speak to your constituents, propose some really interesting bills in Parliament that might have some sort of impact, and just let go of the social media stuff, because that ain't where it's at, son. Let's speak about this. I mean, this is an incredible story. The fact that so many young men coming over on those small boats are not even being properly checked by police, interviewed about their connections to the people smugglers. So much for smashing the gangs. Only 1 in 15 of these people breaking into the country are being quizzed. Who on earth are we letting in?
Well, and again, I think this story is similar to the first story we discussed. It's Labour talking in sound bites and doing nothing. You know, where are the moves to smash the gangs? It's very impossible to see any evidence that any serious efforts are going on to smash migrant smuggling gangs. And this latest report from the inspector at the constabulary, they are showing that there were no checks with criminal databases for migrants coming to this country. Illegal migrants who have stopped coming to this country, I should say. That would be the first thing you'd do, I think, if you were trying to smash criminal smuggling gangs. And yet it's not happening. And of course, the kicker is that the people arrested stopped don't have to be interviewed if they don't want to be interviewed. And so there's no real force behind any of the rhetoric we hear from Labour, and we're hearing a lot about immigration this week, and they're saying things that they know the public want to hear. But the public have grown quite sceptical, because we heard quite a lot from the Tories that sounded good on immigration, and what did we get? Masses more immigration and a disastrous situation at the border. So it's yet more evidence of a political class, whether it be Labour or Tory, that cannot grapple with immigration because they just don't have the willpower to do it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I just worry about this particular and how perilous it is when you've got unchecked men coming from war-torn countries, many of whom despise us, our culture, our very existence on the planet, just coming in, not being interviewed by the police, put into private accommodation as well. You know, when that happens, how do you keep a watchful eye on what they're getting up to? Hotels was bad enough, but at least there was some degree of security. Freddie, thank you ever so much. Freddie Gray there, the deputy editor of The Spectator. Now, look, I think we had an interesting little chit-chat there about Rupert Lowe. And I just want to make it very clear, and Rupert, especially to you if you're listening, I think you're brilliant. I am not going to row back from that. I think you are so talented. I think you're politically passionate. I think you've got gumption. I think your conviction when it comes to policies and what you believe in and what you want to do for this country are entirely sincere. I know you, so I don't have any doubt as to the mettle of your character. The problem is, and this isn't to say that what happened was not gross, was not awful, that you know, have every reason to feel aggrieved, enraged, badly treated perhaps. And I don't know particularly what was going on in the weeks and months before this big ding-dong. But I would just say this, you know, we wanted you to come on this show so we can have a proper conversation. I wouldn't have, you know, hijacked you or done some sort of gotcha. We could have just spoken. But instead you went to do the newsagents, which are a load of extreme leftists who only set out to pillory you, not really anything constructive, and really speaking to the wrong audience, because anybody who believes in reform policies aren't listening to that plasticine-faced moron and that war criminal that he sits next to. Oh, no, that's the other one. That's the rest is politics. Sorry, I forgot that. Anyway, the sort of BBC has-beens who have finally come out as Corbyn lovers. But anyway, can we just take a moment to think about how stuff looks and how stuff impacts, right? Because that is what politics is all about. Let's actually have a listen to the appearance on the newsagents.
He's not fit to be Prime Minister. He's running a cult. He's surrounded by lightweight people whose idea of policy is to wander down to the Marquis of Granby and have a pint and then come up with some sort of press conference the following day. I could join the Tory party tomorrow, I think.
Have they made overtures to you?
I could join them. I mean, look, I talk to all of them all the time, and I think some of them... Some of them are very good people, and as I say, there's some extremely able young Tories who I think share a Tory agenda.
Mm. Now, first of all, the Marquis of Granby is a heritage institution that me and Gawain Towler used to use in our UKIP years as a kind of office, because UKIP didn't have a great amount of money. It had offices, European Parliament offices in a building nearby, but you couldn't use those without getting into a Marine Le Pen level of trouble, because it would be European funds being used for domestic policy. And so there's been a strong heritage of people who work for that party having their socials in the MOG. Nothing wrong with that. Equally, when it comes to writing policy, it takes years. You've got to research it, you've got to cost it, you need a kind of think tank to set up to make sure that when you go and present your manifesto ahead of the most important election that's going to happen potentially in a century, you are making promises that you can deliver. And we're not at that stage in the electoral cycle yet. If they had turned up with a full manifesto right now, everyone would be saying, well, you only just really came into existence about 2 seconds ago. What do you know? We can't believe what's written onto that piece of paper. And then you'll be held accountable if things have to change over the course of time. You're doing a U-turn. You lied about this. It's not, you know, this is how politics works, right? I've been in it for a long time. And when people come into politics with great intentions, sometimes they don't get the game. They don't get the system. It is its own industry. It operates in its own way. And the most important thing in politics is, well, two. One is the policy making. Two is the communication. As a politician, you are the person that stands between the mechanisms of state and the general public. You are that vessel of democracy. So you need to be able to be in listening mode and explaining mode simultaneously. And the problem I have with this is this brilliant talent, Mr. Lowe, it's just not working anymore. I'm just going to read some of these, literally just reading comments underneath the Telegraph podcast. Rupert, this country's in a terrible state. Can you please shut up now? We know you got effed over by them, but we need reform to rid us of Starmer. You cannot do it by starting another party, nor can Ben Habib. And then other people basically saying, you know, this is just really unedifying. Just comment after comment after comment. It's a pity the pair fell out, as they really have the same ideas about what's going on with this country, particularly with immigration. We need as much positivity as possible, not this bickering. I'm starting to wonder if he was just infiltrating reform and this was his intention all along. Someone else says he really is a smug man. He's not. He's a lovely man. I care for him dearly. But Rupert, mate, I'm not sure this is working out for anybody. You know, let's just put politics and the nation first, because we learnt during the Conservative Party era that when people start blathering on about how much they dislike each other in public, everyone looks like a moron. And I just, you know, I despair. All right. Anyway, let's move on, shall we? Because a very important conversation to be had after the break, which is about the assisted dying bill. MPs are now going to be debating the bill again. In fact, they're doing it as we speak, because some major changes have been made in the committee stage. Amendments that some people said, this is great, this is sort of strengthening and putting in the safeguards necessary to make this watertight legislation. Other people saying, oh my goodness, we can't back this anymore. This is basically just green flagging state-sanctioned killing without enough checks and balances. We're going to be speaking to Dr. Gillian Wright, who's the director of Our Duty of Care, after this.
She said we've got lots in common, but all they've got in common is loads of money.
Right.
And I think that's not...
And if they are a bit estranged from their families, perhaps they've got in common the fact that the wife of the family member is possibly to blame for it.
Well, if it is, their relationship won't last long, will it? Because they'll be fighting for who's getting the meal layer. You know, I think it's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Well, let's continue, shall we, in discussing what went on inside the Reform Party and whether or not they're going to suffer from this. Whether you are wholly behind Rupert Lowe and he has every right to be venting some steam at the way things have unfolded, or whether you, like me, just kind of would rather men be men, have the stiff upper lip, button up and stop washing their dirty pants in public. Let's speak to Andrew in Hertfordshire. Hi, Andrew.
Good morning. You really lost the plot this morning. You're acting like Alex Jones, that shock jock in the US.
All right, why?
This is a minor story. You say all the time, I know all these people, I love them dearly. Well, perhaps you might be the problem. This is a situation between an individual and another. If Nigel Farage was this great saviour, he would never have allowed this to become public. So let's just all move on. Let's keep the show going. But at the end of the day, the person that comes out of this the worst is Nigel Farage, because he clearly is no Henry Kissinger. And if you look at the way Trump is sucking up to Putin, that is the sort of behaviour we can expect from Farage.
Really? You think so? What? I don't know how you sort of put all of those bits together. I mean, when I look at the various world leaders out there and who's got shoulders broad enough to actually stand up for Britain on the world stage, there aren't many people who I think look man enough to do that.
Right, OK. If Nigel Farage was man enough to solve this, he would come out now and say, we're out of the European Court, and we are going to send...
But Reform has said that, haven't they? Hold on, that is exactly Reform's policy that's been the case for years now.
Yeah, OK. That's what he should be focusing on, nothing else. And he should be
to be honest, I don't think this is the thing. When's the last time you heard Nigel talking about Rupert, then?
I heard the press conference where he said that he was being referred to the police, and it went some rambling on and then mentioned health issues.
Well, that was a long time ago, though. I don't think he's particularly talking about it anymore, is he? Have I missed something?
He's got you to do it. He's got you to do it for him.
I'm not doing it for him. I'm afraid people like you are phoning up wanting to talk about it. So we actually just listen to the audience and what the audience wants to discuss. I actually, my producer, my brilliant producer, will look at the news of the day and knows our audience and knows the sort of things that's on their mind and the sort of topics they want to be able to have a conversation about. And for them, this is registered as pretty interesting. It's not my choice. I come and present and I try and be even-handed and objective and listen to the audience and say, what do you think about this? Which is what I've asked to happen. And guess what? You phoned in.
Yeah, so when you get home tonight in Gloucester, you got your cider. Listen to the last half an hour when you were randomly just reading out tweets and completely lost the plot.
Why did I lose the plot doing that?
If you just listen to the way you presented it, you were reading it without having done the research around it.
Well, what research am I supposed to have done here?
You're supposed to come onto the programme, discuss a situation, and not just bleed it to death in front of the nation. It's been poor radio.
We're discussing a situation, and you've joined me to discuss it. I don't understand.
Yes,
it doesn't look, Andrew. It doesn't make sense to me that your argument is you don't want to talk about it, but you phoned up to talk about it. Basically, if I could sort of boil this down to the nubbin of what you're trying to say.
if you boil it down to the nubbin of what I'm trying to say is that you've focused on this too much, and I'm trying to help you to move on to something else.
Oh, OK. My producer, Ted, he's having a giggle there. Listen, Andrew, if you want to do some work experience in Talk Towers, you can get in contact with my producer, Ted. Leave your name and your number, because I think he probably needs a little bit of advice about what he puts into my run order every morning, because it's clearly not pleasing the entire audience, and for that I will hold him culpable. Thank you for your professional advice. Let's speak now to John, who's in Surrey. Hi, John.
Hi, lovely to speak to you. I love what you do, but I'm sorry to say that I think you're a bit over in love with Farage. I have been in the Conservative Party for most of my life. I resigned because of that absolutely stagnant approach to politics and the damage that they've done to the country. I was an early joiner. I thought they will be brilliant. Even though I've now resigned, I still would support them and I'd vote for them. The thing I don't like is the democratic structure of it. I write to Nigel and to Reform a lot. I'm a guy with a PhD.
People are loving that B word today, aren't they? That's the second clanger we've had. Sorry, folks.
The reason for that, my dear friend, is that it's dangerous. It's very dangerous. And you and the politicians need to learn a lot more.
Okay, hold on. Can I just tell you, John, that one of the books that I'm reading at the moment is the Quran translated into English, that I'm one of the only people who sat down with one of the lead Islamists in this country to ask him questions about the religion. I studied philosophy at university. I've worked in Pakistan, and I take a great interest, actually, in these things. In fact, I've just been doing interviews over the last 2 days. I spoke to an apostate in America who was telling me about his great concerns about Islam. So I don't know why you think that I'm not.
Let me test you. What does Surah 9:5 say?
Sorry. Oh, I forgot I'm supposed to be the Wikipedia of Islam, and I have the entire sort of hadiths and Quran in my head to be able to pull up at a moment's notice. I don't know what it says verbatim. Why would I?
I've just spent time ringing in to tell you why I've resigned from Reform.
Okay. So why are you testing me on the Quran?
Because it's very important. Your chairman is a religious Islamist.
What is he an Islamist? Is he?
Well, Islam and Islamism, you seem to think of different things. They're exactly the same things. I have 30 years of study of Islam.
I'm pretty sure that they aren't technically, if you want to look at the meaning, the semantics that are put towards those words, that they aren't considered the same thing when we use them as we do. And I've just got to say, Zia Yusuf is not here to defend himself and making accusations that he is politically driven to promote Islam above all else. I don't think is necessarily the case. I think he would refute that. And to me, I'm afraid to say, John, look, I understand that I probably share your concerns about the religion of which we speak, and I think if you looked at my portfolio of work, you would see that that is absolutely the case. And I take my time to speak to various people and have conversations, and I do indeed do my research. But I'm not going to have people phone up and basically start making unpleasant comments about a man in a political party because he happens to be of that faith. I don't think that's particularly right.
Well, it's clear that you don't know enough about Islam. I have a PhD in it.
Well, look, I'm glad you have a PhD, OK? So why don't you go away, write some more theories on it, send them over to the Reform Party. Maybe they'll want to adopt your policies. Thank you very much, John. What is going on today? I didn't say anything about I like this person, that one's to blame, this. I just said both sides, frankly. It's nothing to do with me. I'm not in the party. I'm not some sort of peace broker who has to sit there, make them hold hands and sing Kumbaya. I must admit, when you start seeing people attacking an individual because they're of a religion, we can all be concerned about the impacts on society of certain members of certain religions. Okay, I am not dumbing that down. I'm the last person on this here planet to dumb that down or to sweep it under the carpet or be too lily-livered to have that conversation. And anyone who knows me knows that that is the case. But what I will not tolerate under any circumstances is someone coming on to attack an individual that they don't know. They've not had a conversation with this person. They've not met them. They've never asked them what their belief system is. But to decide that that person is an Islamist because of the colour of their skin, because of their name, if that's what someone out there is doing, you probably ought to check yourself, okay? Because that is what one might call racism. You've got to get to know someone. You can critique a religion. You can critique what is written in their holy book. You can look at the societal impacts of people from a particular culture that, you know, that are taking place. You can have that dialogue, and you can have that dialogue with vigour and with candour. But you cannot go around and start attacking other people that you've never met before, accusing them of being something really quite reprehensible. I will not stand for that on this programme. And this isn't about being in love with the former Nigel Farage or sucking up to Zia Yusuf. This is about just being a person with moral integrity, okay? So I don't want to hear anything more like that again today, because it's just not cricket. Oh, let's have a little talk about cricket. Shall we talk about football, shall we? Because it's time for you to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning a weekend away in Munich at the end of May to watch the biggest game in European football. That's right, the Champions League final. And not only that, if you get those tickets to go along and sit in the stands and yell your lungs out, we're also going to be giving $5 grand to you to spend on whatever you want. Maybe enjoy a beer kellen or two. This is how.
Win a once-in-a-lifetime trip to watch the Champions League final live. Go to talksport.com/win for your chance to embark on the ultimate odyssey of football ecstasy. With 2 tickets to the Champions League final live at the iconic Munich Football Arena, Germany, including flights, accommodation, and an uber-massive $5 grand in your hand. How about that? Enter online now at talksport.com/win. Terms and conditions apply. Achtung, baby.
18 plus, UK, excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win all of that, simply text the word football to 83338 by the 16th of May at 11 p.m. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission, or send your name and number by post to Champions League final competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 21st of May. This is a TalkSport limited competition run on TalkSport Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Blimey, a lot of you are messaging in about reform. I can understand why. I think the audience are very interested in that particular party. And it's just, it splits people on the issue. It really does. There are people essentially saying, I really wish that this would all go away, that it'd be great if, you know, if they could kiss and make up, that people vote for policies, not personalities. There are other people who seem to think that I've sort of, you know, crawled up a certain leader's backside and doing his bidding for him. I'm not. And someone else said, you know, can you stop saying that you know these people? It's not all about you. It turns out I do really know these people, okay? I'm just saying, I've just got, you know, got some skin in this game, don't I? You know, I was Nigel's right-hand woman for a long time. I was then a Brexit Party MEP and worked very closely with Rupert Lowe when he came over and joined Reform before Nigel came back as leader. I know and like both men incredibly well, so perhaps I have a little bit of insight onto the situation. A number of other people have sort of been saying, look, you know, what was wrong with the last few callers. Well, look, I hope nothing was wrong with them. I wish them well, and thank you for being in the audience and actually picking up the phone and joining me to discuss things, which I do always really appreciate. But like I said, when I hear things that I find slightly disturbing, I will call them out. Doesn't make me weak and lily-livered. It means that I have, I hope, a degree of judgment. Let's talk about now. Well, we're going to talk to Mark Francois, who's Shadow Defence Minister, in part about the Chagos Islands, but also about a petition calling on the government not to make changes to legislation that would allow Northern Ireland veterans to be prosecuted for doing their duty in combating terrorism as part of Operation Banner. Mark, great to have you on the programme. Explain to me about this petition and the legislation that could actually see some of our ex-forces facing the law.
Right. So the petition, which has been going for just under a week and now has over 60,000 signatures, and I'm very much hoping that after this interview some of your listeners might add to that, was created by a number of Army veterans. And it says basically that the government should not allow any changes to legislation which would allow Army veterans to be prosecuted for fighting terrorism in Northern Ireland on what was known at the time as Operation Banner. The context is the government are saying they want to take out parts of the 2023 Legacy Act, which we introduced while we were in government. It would have two effects. One, it would mean that they could start this whole cycle again of endless investigation and re-investigation of veterans, many of whom were investigated and cleared of any wrongdoing at the time. And secondly, it would allow Gerry Adams to sue the British taxpayer. So we think this is beyond bonkers, but that is what the Labour government are proposing to do. The veterans are furious, and so we're trying to get 100,000 signatures on the petition so we can have a debate in Parliament and hopefully persuade the government to drop this very bad idea.
What is the motivation for them to do this, though? Why do they want to do this? It doesn't seem to be in the national interest.
It isn't. But the answer to your very good question is, look, this is a government dominated by human rights lawyers. The Prime Minister is a human rights lawyer. The Attorney General is a human rights lawyer. And some courts in Northern Ireland ruled that some elements of the Legacy Act were incompatible with the Human Rights Act, which goes back to the European Convention on Human Rights. The government could have appealed to higher courts against those rulings, but chose not to because they wanted to uphold the Human Rights Act. So this is all coming about because we have a Labour government obsessed, I use the word deliberately, with human rights, even to the point of throwing Army veterans to the wolves.
I know that there are a lot of ex-servicemen who are deeply worried about this, and also setting a precedent in future for, you know, the theatre of war is an ugly place. Decisions have to be made in a split second, and this idea that now when we're sending men over to fight to defend our nation, to protect us from tyranny and protect us from terrorism, that they may have to be questioning what they're doing every single moment, which I think would be a huge burden.
Well, of course. And in fact, Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, has put out a brilliant video this morning that absolutely summarises that point. And he includes in it a letter from a former commander of the SAS, now a retired brigadier, who explains this in detail. And there's a wonderful quote in there when he says, "Why would you soldier for a government that will abandon you?" And many veterans and serving soldiers now feel that this government hasn't got their back. And as you say, why would you rationally want to join the army if you had to go and fight, which is what ultimately soldiers are trained to do, and then 40 or 50 years later, you know, in the autumn of your life, find yourself dragged into a courtroom to be prosecuted for obeying orders in the first place, you know? So this isn't just about protecting veterans, although that's critically important. They were there to uphold the rule of law in Northern Ireland in the first place against the terrorists. But it's also about providing a situation where people feel confident to join the army today, knowing they're not going to be, pulled in front of a court and a bunch of human rights lawyers half a century later. And in that scenario, what sensible person would sign up?
Right, exactly. You don't want people in the battlefield suddenly thinking, oh, if I do something, I might get in trouble for it down the line. Let's talk now. We're talking about getting in trouble for something down the line. It seems that's the measured strategy that the Labour Party are deploying when it comes to the Chagos Islands deal, because apparently they're now delaying plans to hand over the Chagos Island to Mauritius because they're worried about the political cost of it. They're worried about an almighty backlash. I mean, perhaps that indicates they shouldn't be doing it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, yes. Well, look, we have been, I can tell your viewers and listeners in all sincerity, we have been arguing against this from the moment we heard that they might be seriously contemplating it. How does it make sense at a time when the government have taken very controversial decisions to restrict winter fuel payments to up to 10 million pensioners, now to take away some PIP payments from disabled people, to at the same time give away up to £18 billion of British taxpayers' hard-earned money to Mauritius in order to rent back a strategic island that belongs to us in the first place. And someone in number 10 miraculously seems to have woken up to the fact that this isn't very popular. And I think the reason that they're sitting on it is they can't persuade their MPs to vote for it, rightfully, because it's plainly bonkers.
Let's talk now about the comments from relatively new Chancellor in Germany, Friedrich Merz, who has basically said that Germany needs to have a bigger and better army than Britain. I mean, it would be great to see Germany finally sort of crawling out of their guilt-ridden ineptitude when it comes to actually standing up for European interests and being part of the fight to defend Europe against our enemies. But I don't really understand why he needs it to be bigger than the UK. What's your take on this?
Well, Germany are an ally in NATO, and NATO has helped to keep the peace since the end of the Second World War. And there's been this big debate about we should all spend in NATO more money, and I think that we should. So, if the Germans are going to increase their defence spending materially, which, given the war in Ukraine, they say they now are going to do, I welcome that. We're going to increase our defence spending as well because, perhaps I could give your constituents, your listeners some flavour. I was in Poland a week ago, and in Poland, obviously they're much nearer to the problem. The official policy of the Polish government is now to have a massive rearmament programme in order to prepare to fight a war, if necessary, they'd rather deter it, with Russia within 3 years.
Wow.
So the Poles, and this is the policy of the government.
Yeah.
The Poles are now spending nearly 5% of GDP on defence. We're pledged to spend half that. And they've got 4 armoured divisions, they're growing a 5th, and now they want a 6th one. So all of us in NATO need to increase our spending because history shows the best way to prevent war is to deter it by persuading a potential aggressor, in this case, obviously, Vladimir Putin, a former KGB colonel, by the way, that he couldn't win because we're prepared and have the kit and the training to fight him. And that comes back to where we came in, which is you need trained soldiers to do that, and you're not going to have enough of those if they think they get sued for fighting a war.
Do you know, I think you make extremely important points there, Mark. We live in perilous times, but I wouldn't put much trust in this government to make sure that we're equipped and prepared to deal with them. We're going to take a short break now, but when we come back, as promised, we are going to be having the discussion on the assisted dying bill, which is again being debated by MPs in Parliament ever since there have been amendments added to it. Has it made it better? Has it made it worse? Is it going to pass? Should it pass? All of those questions after this.
can they have those facilities, those privileges? There's a couple of points what we need to reinforce here. Our prison staff need greater protection. They need stab vests, they need tasers, a bare minimum. And I might sound flippant, but when it comes to guarding Hashim Abedi, his brother, and Ruda Bakana, as far as I'm concerned, you can give the prison staff an AK-47.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Now, the assisted dying bill is back in Parliament, being debated by MPs today after having some amendments added to it. Amendments that are supposed to fortify the safeguards to ensure that it is properly applied, to ensure that there is no slippage, to ensure that we have the best, most controlled assisted dying legislation in the world. Well, is that really what's happened? Because the Royal College of Physicians have turned around and said, we can't support this anymore. The Royal College of Psychiatrists have turned around and said, we don't want to put our name to this bill. We're worried about how weakened it's become. And my great concern is this. Anywhere else in the world where they have put in place assisted dying legislation, what then seems to happen is, yes, a particular bill might go through Parliament with particular checks and balances, and it only applies to people at end-of-life care when they know there's only 6 months left to live. How do you know you've only got 6 months left to live? But what seems to happen over the course of time is a gradual erosion of those safeguards because people challenge it in the courts. And so what you find is the thresholds are then dropped even lower. So you'll have someone saying, well, look, I've been given 9 months to live and I want to start making arrangements now. Or, well, actually, I'm suffering because of this condition. It's not a chronic, death. It has to be a sort of death-related condition, but you know what I mean. Without going into details, but when this is supposed to deal with a very sort of small slither of particular cases, what you have all of a sudden is young women with mental health conditions saying, "I find my life horrible to live." And I don't want to anymore. And it's sort of the reach of it gets broader and broader and broader until all of those safeguards fail to apply. That is my main concern. Let's speak to Dr. Gordon MacDonald, who is the CEO of Care Not Killing. Gordon, looking at some of these amendments that have been put in place, at one point it was supposed to be a High Court judge signing this off, and now there is a panel of experts instead, a legal professional, a psychiatrist and a social worker to oversee the process. Now, some people would say, well, surely this is better if you've got like a cohort of people with different interests and different expertises, all having to come to an agreement on a particular case. But all the professional bodies that seem to represent these particular individuals are saying, we don't agree with this. We don't think that this bill is fit for purpose.
Yeah, and the point about the High Court involvement, which Kim was parroting as being making it the safest bill in the world, was that the High Court would be independent. It wouldn't be a person who basically signed up in principle to assisted suicide and who was keen to see it being implemented. And that's what the danger is of these panels, is that we will end up with a self-selecting group of people, because people who don't agree with it or who are not comfortable with it, or even people who are all right with it in principle but just don't want to be involved, as many professionals are, will not want to be involved. So we will end up with the ones who are the enthusiasts who will sit on these panels. There is a shortage of psychiatrists as it is. There's a shortage of social workers as it is. So there is also a practical issue. It's not clear where the psychiatrists and the social workers are going to come from to have any effective scrutiny take place at all.
I was speaking to a psychiatrist the other day, and she was explaining to me that one of the big problems with all of this is there are things, mental health can be treatable, and that if you're given a very dismal prognosis to your health, this tends to trigger a psychological response. You are going to suddenly probably find yourself panicked, depressed, scared about how you're going to cope in those final days. And yet what we should be offering instead, rather than saying, well, you know, considering it's going to be pretty awful, you might want to end your life, is support to say, how can we make sure that you make the most of the time you have left, that your fears are assuaged, that you have top-notch palliative care. And surely, to me, you know, I don't understand why we don't put more money into hospice care, who about 3/4 of their budget comes through charity shops, not from the government, who have been hit so hard by the increase in employers' national insurance. Why are we not putting money and resources and efforts into what is actually dignity in dying, rather than putting into position some misnomered legislation which isn't dignity in dying, it's actually state-sanctioned killing?
Yeah, and it also undermines suicide prevention, of course, because on the one hand you have part of the hospital trying to stop people committing suicide, and on the other part they're actually helping people to do so. But you're right, you know, the fundamental problem in this country is the underfunding of palliative care. Palliative care is provided far too late in the process. In fact, the whole health service needs to reprioritise and recognise that 90% of the population will need palliative care. And since 1/4 of patients in hospitals are in the last year of life, that should be being prioritised rather than it being seen as a sort of Cinderella service that gets rolled out at the very end. So we do need much more investment in palliative care, not just in the hospices, although they are obviously very short of cash, but also in the community and in the general medical situation, general hospitals as well. But that costs a lot of money, and that's why the government doesn't want to do it, because it will cost money.
That is my worry. That is my big worry. Dr. Gordon MacDonald, thank you ever so much, CEO of Care Not Killing. I just want to make clear, though, before we move on, that I have a tremendous amount of sympathy to people who are supporting this bill and for the right reasons. My own family has lost a beloved member due to MS, which is a brutal, brutal disease, and the suffering that people out there have. It's very easy for someone sort of sitting here comfortably able-bodied going, oh well, we shouldn't allow X, Y and Z. If it was me, if I was in chronic pain, if I just wanted to have a choice about the day that I die, make sure my family members are around me, I understand that so much. I really get that. I sympathise with it from the bottom of my heart. I do. My empathy on that situation is more than you can even imagine. And I wish there is a way of drafting legislation that can accommodate this. I do. But my big worry is that you can't put the cart before the horse when it's a matter of life and death. It's, you know, we need this due scrutiny, and thankfully it's happening. We're going to keep an eye on the passage of that bill through Parliament, other amendments that may be made. Let's go back to the phone lines now, because they're pretty busy today, and let's speak to my namesake, Alex in Kent. Hi, Alex.
Hello. Hi, Alex. Great to talk to you. I think it's only the second time I've talked to you.
Wow. Well, you should call more often, especially with a name like that.
Yeah, I know, but they won't let me through.
Oh, really? Why not?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'll give him a clip round the ears after work. Don't you worry about that.
Please do that. Anyway, I just phoned up, you know, when you were talking about Reform Party and Rupert Lowe and that Andrew and then that John. I completely disagree with them. I'm a Reform member, okay? I don't mind saying that, and I tell everybody I meet I am, you know. And I think you are very, very neutral.
I have to be. It's my job. I'm trying my best to be.
Yeah, of course you are, and you always have been. And you say both sides. And as for that John with his PhD, well,
Oh, you're pleased to know John has messaged me. He's also said, I'm never listening to your show again, so I don't know if he's going to hear this, to be honest. But he said, John has said, Alex, it was very rude of you to defame me in the way that you did. I do know your chairman. He is losing Reform votes. You clearly do not know anything about Islam. He reminds me he has 30 years of learning in the study of Islam. He says, this text is for you personally. And I'm like, John, mate, I didn't defame you. I stopped you defaming somebody else. You were calling a man you don't know an Islamist. You can't do that, son. I wasn't defaming you. I was just pointing out you can't do that.
Yeah, he's probably never met the man, so how the hell would he say anything like that? you know. And really, has he had 30 years? Or is he just lying?
Well, he may well do. Look, he may well do. He may be a brilliant scholar in the subject of Islam, and I'd love him to come back on and actually talk about his concerns and the societal impacts, because it's a fascinating topic and a much-needed conversation that we're all still a little bit too concerned about having and how we might come across, and it's a very important topic to investigate. But I'm not going to have someone coming on, point the finger at someone they don't know and actually level that sort of charge against them. Alex, my darling, thank you for calling for the second time. I'm sure we're going to do this again. We can call it an Alex party. OK, let's speak to Carl, who's in Liverpool. Hi, Carl.
Hi, Alex. I love the Liverpool party that you're doing. And you had a guy calling it before, Andrew. I love the fact he rang in with no point, and you're exposed he had no point. And, you're doing such a great job, and you're telling the nation what they need to hear, love, and we all love you for it. So don't let the minority, you know what I mean, put you down. You've done great with them. You've done great, and you're telling everyone what we all need to hear. So I just thought I'd give you the supportive little call, and we all love you in Liverpool as well.
Oh, thank you, Carl. That's just really nice. Look, I don't get things right all the time. I'll tell you what, it's not easy when you sit in this studio by yourself for 3 hours, and you've got to make sure that you don't swear on air. That's pretty hard sometimes, I can tell you that much. You've got to be clued up as much as you can about all of the stories you're talking about, because you've got to ask the right questions. It takes a heck of a lot of research and knowledge retention.
I understand,
but when you talk for 3 hours solid, you know, you're going to make mistakes. You don't always do things right. Sometimes you come off air and you think, oh, gosh, I wish I hadn't done that.
I don't think you made any mistake at all, really. I mean, obviously, people are going to misinterpret what you mean, or obviously they've got their own points of view that they stand by and all that. But at least ring up with a reason.
I did find it slightly curious. I don't know if Andrew's still listening. And if you are, Andrew, you know, I love all of my listeners, and everyone's allowed to phone in, disagree with me, fight with me. That is what this is all about. We believe in free speech. And don't you worry, I've got a thick enough skin to handle it. I've been in that politics game for a long time.
Have a think before you phone in.
But I did find it slightly curious to phone in complaining that we were talking about a subject and then talk about it. That was slightly lost on me, if I'm honest with you. But you know what? The phone lines have never been so busy. People are massively engaged with this topic. They want to talk about it, which is why we're doing it. And believe me, actually, if I could let you all in to a little secret, if we didn't have to talk about this, I actually wouldn't, OK? But as a presenter, I have to be a professional. And if my producers say to me, this is a topic today, and this is what the nation wants you to discuss, you've got to get on with it, then I have to. Because like I said, I do know these men personally. I care for them both deeply. And it's really awkward and pretty hard in my line of work to have to do this, OK? But I'm doing it nonetheless because I have to. And I am trying my best to be neutral and to try and sort of weigh up both sides. But more than anything, listen to you guys and let your thoughts be known so you can all have this topic aired in the way that you want it to be. Like I said, you have no idea what it's like unless you've done this job to have to be, dealing with a fallout between friends on air. Right, going to take a short break now. I'm going to get a well-deserved cup of tea. See you after this.
Yes.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, now, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made
a mistake. It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show, and plenty to talk about today, isn't there? And people are getting rather hot under the collar, particularly about the reform spat, which is why we're doing this story. Like I said before the break, if I had my wish, if I had a little magic lamp that a genie would pop out of, we wouldn't cover it. I'm just being honest, because I just know the men involved personally, so it's awful. I really cannot tell you how difficult it is when there's two people you know and your job is to sit there and sort of talk about a ding-dong between them that you rather wish hadn't happened, but that is what we're doing, and it's certainly got the phone lines buzzing, so we will be revisiting that subject, even if it does happen to be against my personal wishes. I just want to read a quick message here, because we did assisted dying before the break, and if I don't read this out now, we'll have sort of moved on topically, but it is important that I read this. This is from Stuart in Perthshire, who says, I'm in the end stages of MS and I'm sick of the palliative care argument. Palliative care does not relieve the indignity that many suffer at the end, and I'm afraid the argument against usually comes from religious, which isn't right for we atheists. I get it. Like I said, my absolutely beloved uncle was in your situation, and it's probably one of the most difficult pieces of legislation to get right. But how important it is that if we're going to have this legislation in place, how important it is that we do get it right. OK, let's move on to our top story in this hour, which is the Putin no-show at the Istanbul peace talks, which has rather sort of dashed Ukrainian hopes that there might be some sort of breakthrough. Zelensky is sending a team to show up and put forward Ukraine's side of the argument, but has dared Putin to demonstrate some leadership, and meanwhile has said that he's disrespecting Trump by snubbing the peace talks. Let's speak now to a man who knows Putin and isn't really a big fan, and I think the feelings are mutual, Sir Bill Browder, Putin's #1 foreign enemy and head of the Global Magnitsky Justice Campaign. It's great to have you back on the programme, Sir Bill. Why is Putin not showing up in Istanbul? Is this because he doesn't take this seriously? He's just messing everybody around, dragging out time? Is it because actually he dares not leave the compounds at the Kremlin because he's worried?
It's very simple. Putin is not showing up in Istanbul because he has no intention of ending the war. He's made it very clear from the day he invaded right up until today that his only solution from his perspective to this war stopping is a total victory from Russia, a total surrender of Ukraine. And Ukraine is not going to surrender. And he has, other than that, there's no reason for him to show up and have any discussions, because from his perspective, he doesn't plan on doing anything other than winning. And so I think that this whole game of, will he or won't he show up, this is all just sort of almost the Trump apprenticeship show, where Putin comes out and says, I'm ready to negotiate. Trump then says to Zelensky, I really would advise you to show up. Zelensky then shows up. Putin then doesn't show up himself, and nor does any minister from the Russian government show up. We're all sitting on the edge of our chairs, and then nothing will happen. And that's where we are today.
I mean, is there a risk now that Russia could run out of road? Because I'm really finding it difficult to read America's, or let's say Donald Trump's, position in all of this, because on the outside it constantly looks like Putin appeasement. And yet I kind of live in hope that when it comes to the egos of statesmen, that Putin sort of, you know, running circles around America, or so it seems, might at some point have some impact on the White House, and they start to lose patience with him. Or perhaps this for them is a strategic way of keeping Russia where they want them to be, while potentially bleeding them dry economically. I mean, what's your take on America's response to all of this?
Well, sadly, America and I should say Donald Trump have been since he came into his second term a very strong supporter of Putin. The United States voted with Russia and North Korea at the United Nations against various proposals to condemn the war in Ukraine. The United States stopped, for a brief period of time, military aid to Ukraine and stopped intelligence sharing. There was the famous Oval Office meeting where Trump attacked Zelensky. And every time Putin doesn't do what he's been asked to do, what the world wants him to do, Trump apologizes for it. He just said yesterday, well, he kind of understands why Putin didn't show up, and he's probably not going to show up until Trump shows up. And the previous time he said, you know, I think he's just playing for time. I've done that kind of thing in my own business deals. And so, you know, it would be nice to think that Trump has got some kind of grand plan, that there is some national interest that he's operating in for American national interests. But what we see here is he's kind of on Putin's side, and I'd like to be proven wrong on this, but everything that I've seen so far and all the wishful thinking that people have done, that he's somehow going to pull a rabbit out of a hat and be tougher than anybody on Russia, that just hasn't happened.
What would be your prognosis for where we're at and what's going to happen moving forwards? Because at least there is going to be some sort of meeting, the first peace talk in 3 years. One has to wonder how much longer Putin can... I don't know how the Russian economy is doing. I keep hearing different things. I keep hearing people go, actually, because of restrictions on fossil fuels, they're going great guns and still managing to sell gas and oil around the world and funding the war effort and a rearming. Other people are saying, well, he's limping towards destruction, and that there's already people in Russia having conversations about what a post-Putin world would look like. What do you think is happening behind the scenes?
Well, Russia is suffering greatly, as you said. I think that the economy is doing very badly. They're losing hundreds of thousands, if not close to 1 million soldiers in either from death or disability in this war. It's a disaster. But the one thing that you have to understand about Russia is that it's not a democracy. It's not as if they're going to vote Putin out because they're upset. That doesn't. People don't have that opportunity anymore in Russia, and so he can absorb, or I should say, the Russian people can absorb 100 times the pain that we can in a democracy without any problem for him. I mean, his only problem is a coup, and he's such a paranoid man that he's doing everything possible to avoid a coup. Remember the guy who was marching towards Moscow, Prigozhin, back in the day, and then. Remember that plane that was
magically fell out the sky, didn't it?
To the ground. That's the only thing Putin has to worry about. And at the moment, he's got it pretty well under control. And so I think, it's kind of like North Korea. Their economy is not doing very well, but it's such a police state, it's such a totalitarian regime that the Kim family has been in power for 3 generations. And that's what it's like for Putin. And so to answer your question, where's this thing going to go? I would say that Putin can't give up. Because if he gives up, he ends up getting overthrown. That's the one thing that could get him overthrown in Russia. And the Ukrainians can't give up because if they give up, they become they have to surrender. They become an occupied country, and all the women get raped, and all the men get killed, and all the children get kidnapped. And so, where's this going to go? It's going to carry on until one side or the other has a decisive advantage.
I remember at the outbreak of this invasion, the words I kept hearing being sort of bandied about by various commentators and strategic experts was Golden Bridge. That it's going to be very difficult for Putin to go, oh, do you know what, guys, shouldn't have done that, shouldn't have invaded Ukraine, don't seem to be able to win anything, better scuttle back to the Kremlin and tell everyone to down their weapons. So instead you need to create a situation, an off-ramp by which he can sort of save face and things can reach a denouement. And do you think there's any hope whatsoever in perhaps that is baked into the American strategy?
Well, I mean, that's a total unrealistic fantasy. That's not how it works in Russia. In Russia is a total brutality place. There's no golden bridge. There's no, graceful exit. Russia is a place where you either defeat or get defeated. That there's the aggressor and then the victim, and nobody ever compromises. Nobody ever makes deals. You either destroy your enemy or you get destroyed, and that's how it works there. And anyone who thinks that somehow Putin is ever going to back down, they don't understand Russia. They don't understand Putin. He's not going to. That's just not that's just not how it works over there. And nor would any other leader of Russia if it wasn't Putin. That's just the brutal nature of the place. And so there's no off ramp for him. The only way that he's going to end this war is either he's not in power or he loses the war. And so we have to figure out how we can arm the Ukrainians so they can get the decisive military advantage so Putin has no choice to negotiate. And that comes from weapons, and that comes from massive sanctions on their oil, because the oil is what allows them to continue to buy weapons from abroad and to fund their war.
Yeah, well, I always find it remarkable, Bill, that, they go, we're going to put more sanctions on Russia. Oh, we found some more down the back of the sofa. And you kind of think, why didn't you put them there in the first place? I mean, what is this sort of incremental application of punishment against Russia? Because it doesn't seem to be having the desired effect. So, Bill Browder, thank you ever so much for joining me today. Like I said, the phone lines are pretty tasty right now. So shall we do some messages and calls? Because in the biz, we call it viewer engagement, listener engagement. And we seem to be having a lot of it today. So who am I to prevent you from having your say? Let's speak to Michael, who is in Chesterfield. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Alex.
What do you want to talk about, my darling?
Just a few points I'd like to make. I looked up an accurate dictionary definition this morning of the word treason, the betrayal of one's nation. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I honestly believe I could make a pretty good court case against Starmer for the betrayal of the country. Come to that matter, you can take one or two politicians came a long time ago, such as Blair and others, who were guilty of the same sort of crime.
What particular things do you think are treasonous by Starmer?
By not taking the slightest bit of notice of the wishes of the vast majority of the people. We're supposed to live in a democracy, but they don't give a monkeys about the wishes of the vast majority of the people. He's inviting, essentially, what is a load of filth and scum from medieval countries into this country, endangering our own people, especially women. And I honestly believe that we are only one major atrocity away from major trouble in this country. People on the streets, in their thousands, hundreds of thousands, because people have had a bellyful of this man.
Well, I do think, I say repeatedly, and in probably a far less colourful language than you use there to describe people coming over on small boats, but I do say that this is, of course, a security risk. Who do people think are organising these boats over the channel? Lon Polly? Like, come on, these are the most hardened international criminal organisations, often connected to terrorist groups and hostile regimes, that are making billions, if not trillions, out of the illegal passage of people. And we don't know who these people are and what their intentions are. If you wanted to get into a country to cause it harm, you're not going to come in via the front door and ask for a visa, are you?
No, exactly.
It is imperiling our nation.
But, yeah, exactly. The village idiot can see what's happening, honestly. But why can't this guy? And the question that the woman asked in Parliament the other day was the best question ever asked there.
Which woman, what question? Going to have to be narrow it down a little bit for me there.
The Welsh MP who asked him if there was anything he believed in last week that he didn't believe in this week.
Well, the thing is, I don't think he believes in anything, does he? And this is what I don't understand about this. Why is it that these people go, oh, well, it might be breaking international law to defend our territory. Oh, well, we can't do that because of maritime law. Oh, we can't do that because of the Dublin Accord. Oh, we can't do that because of a UN treaty after the Second World War, so we may as well just let any old people come in and put Britain in danger. No. If the international law says allow any old character from a war-torn nation in, regardless of what their intentions are, then I'm afraid you have to break international law because it's not fit for purpose. I agree with you entirely when it comes to your sentiments on Sir Keir Starmer's more treasonous approach to certain elements of our politics. That was Michael in Chesterfield. Thank you for your call. Let's speak to John in Crewe. Hi, John.
Yeah, good morning, Alex. Pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, you too.
This issue with Rupert Lowe, I think this is the best example I can give as to why Rupert Lowe is totally wrong. I watched him some time ago being interviewed on TV, and he brought up the subject of MPs' pay. He said they're underpaid. He said they should be paid. I think the figure was 500,000 a year. MPs should be.
Wow.
Now that some people might even agree with it. I personally think that the likes of the ones we've got now should be on below minimum wage because there's no quality there. Yeah. But that, ignoring the fact, that's his opinion because he's a very rich man. But where he lacks any political shrewdness, unlike Nigel Farage, Farage knows damn well that the enemy he is against is not the Conservative Party. Anybody that follows politics knows the Conservatives are finished. They are toast, basically. The real enemy is the media, particularly the BBC, Sky, ITV. They're the enemy of reform because they will twist anything. Imagine if that was the policy and Rupert Lowe was sticking to this 400,000. What would they say?
Well,
they would have it headlines on the news all the time.
I think that you make an important point here, John, and it's something long before they all messaging going, you're so obsessed with Nigel. You said, no, I'm not. I've known the man for 20, I've known him for all my adult life. But it doesn't mean that I think he's sort of impervious to criticism. But I would say this, before everyone starts, going, he shouldn't have done this. Name me a more successful politician. Like, love him or loathe him, name me somebody who took on the EU and won without even being elected, who took on NatWest Bank and the debanking scandal and won. This is a man who, like I said, everyone's got character flaws, but this is a guy who, when it comes to politics, is probably one of the most significant politicians this century, possibly one of the most significant politicians of a generation, of 100 years. I mean, when you look at the changes that his presence has ushered in, not just in terms of leaving the EU, but actually having the debate about immigration, moving that Overton window, being the vanguard, taking the flak head on by raising issues which everybody else wanted to censor. His presence in politics has radically changed politics. And so you got to give the man credit where it's due. He understands politics fairly well. Now, he makes mistakes. We all do, and I would be the first to call them out, and believe you me, I do call them out. I have said repeatedly, the whole debacle over Rupert Lowe could have been handled better by some sort of, BTEC student studying strategic communications in Zaire. But but the point is this, we all want in politics to people to be focusing on the politics and not mithering on like a pair of ex-lovers who have fallen out and just want to chew off anybody's ear saying they did wrong. Have you seen this? Have you seen what they did? Have you seen? It's just, come on. There's a time and a place to have those sorts of emotions and emotive response to things. And if you're men on the political front line, you've got to have a stiff upper lip, right? You've just got to focus on fighting the good fight, and that means not wasting energy fighting each other. John in Crewe, thank you ever so much. Right, we're going to take a break now. And if your blood ain't boiling already today, here's a topic that's going to get you furious. 20-mile-per-hour zones. They're awful, aren't they? I hate them. I rant about them all the time. It's ridiculous. You cannot even control a car's speed at that low revolution. Most car engines turn around at such a high power. If you say, right, let's try and stay within a 10% margin of 20 miles per hour, the car's like, Computer says no. And now a road safety charity is calling for a speed limit on city roads of 10 miles per hour. Why don't we just all set fire to our cars, never use a combustion engine again, bring back horses and carts and donkeys and sedan chairs, and therefore there'll never be an accident ever again in the world. If you reduce speeds down to 10 miles per hour, people are going to be so focused on trying to go 10 miles per hour that they'll probably be ploughing into pedestrians left, right and centre. This stuff is a nonsense. I've pretty much spoilt the ending to this, haven't I? So we're going to be discussing it after the break. Stay tuned.
This is a tried and tested method. It's been working, it's regulated, it's monitored. There are different systems elsewhere in the world. We're not doing that, we're doing the Oregon model, and also we're making it the British model, and that's what's important about today. MPs saying, this is our template, how can we make it as good as possible? So yes, it avoids any loopholes, but it also allows those people who want to let go. Now frankly, most of us will carry on to our last breath. Yeah. Those people in agony, we've got to give them that option, that right, that choice. It's their death, their body. Why can't they have that right to let go?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Now, I'm about to be joined by a very special person indeed, someone I have a great amount of admiration for. But before that, there's a little bit of breaking news for you. Shakil Tibu, 20 years old, has been jailed at the Old Bailey for life with a minimum term of 29 years for murdering Cher Maximan, who was stabbed in front of her 3-year-old daughter at the annual crime fest, the Notting Hill Carnival's inappropriately named Family Day. That poor young woman and her poor kids have lost a mum. That blimmin' carnival. I mean, I'm glad this rotter has gone down for a minimum term of 29 years. But it's another prime example of an event that guaranteed year on year always has stabbings, drugs. There's a real risk of people being trampled, sexual assaults. I mean, it is literally the Sodom and Gomorrah of festivities. And yet nobody wants to do anything about it because community relations. It's like, you know, letting randos into your country from hostile states and going, well, it looks unkind if we don't. It might look a little bit racist if we say to sort of Afghans and Syrians, sorry, you can't come here. Oh, we can't change the Notting Hill Carnival and where it takes place and how it's policed because that's going to be offensive. Meanwhile, people are being murdered. They're being murdered. So there you go. That's my little rant over. I can't wait for the Notting Hill Carnival to roll around again so I can moan about its very existence. Just put it in a park where you can actually monitor the entrance and egress with weapons detectors. Because if you go to the Notting Hill Carnival, what they have is weapons detectors, but it's optional if you walk through them. So if you're packing some steel, you're not going to go through and go beep, beep, beep. Oh, no, you found my gun, you found my knife. What a ridiculous system that is. And that's the result. Devastating. Anyway, we're joined now by Alan Miller, co-founder of the Together Declaration, and I have a sneaking feeling we're going to be talking to Alan about a bit more than just 10-mile-per-hour zones, judging by his placard. We'll get on to that subject a bit later, but let's start off with this onerous policy proposal that city roads have brought down to 10 miles per hour. I mean, Alan, I just don't even think that's feasible, is it? You can't drive at 10 miles per hour.
Alex, what we're seeing is an increase, if we can believe it, on the war on the motorist, the war on the citizen, the war on the most needy, people that have disabilities, women who travel at night, families who rely on cars. We've seen it with low traffic neighbourhoods, with ULEZ, with clean air zones, low emission zones, and now those that have got us. And as it happens, Alex, in London, it's around 6 to 7 miles an hour, like the Stone Age, unfortunately. But across the country, they've had us at 20 miles an hour. We know the impacts on emergency services in Wales and elsewhere. Now they want to get it down to 10. They want to do what Mette Coban said, who now, wink, wink, is the unelected representative of the environment for this government internationally, talking to all the globalists. They want to make it as difficult as possible for us to drive. They want to make it excruciatingly annoying, sitting, stultifying in traffic, pouring out quite a bit of fumes as it happens because you're stuck in traffic, going long ways round with open roads everywhere, not being able to be accessed, and now not 20 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour, for our safety. These are the same people that told us about our safety over the last few years, that did all sorts of draconian measures that resulted in spies and censoring. And, you know, I'm always nervous when they say it's for our safety, for our own good. The question, Alex,
isn't it? Because yeah, carry on, darling.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Britain, which was the engineering champion of the world, which, developed all sorts of cars, Birmingham and other places that were really seminal, now has a situation where it's faster to walk in many places. Our metropolis, our trade, our commerce, our balance of trade, we should be doing all sorts of innovative transformations in transport, engineering, and instead what they're just doing is stultifying everything. And it's a real problem. And we would encourage all your viewers and listeners to actually write to MPs and councillors and let them know our voices. And we know a lot of councillors have changed, particularly around these issues, Alex, right? We've seen over 600 new councillors just been voted in. And one of the key issues is around both potholes, which haven't been filled, and low traffic neighbourhoods and these impacts.
And actually, there's a relationship between the two of them, isn't there? Because there's part of an argument that, if you reduce the speed so much, then I think it's something to do with sort of litigation when it comes to someone going through potholes and damage to the car. So they're not totally unrelated. Now, you're there at a protest outside Parliament today against the assisted dying legislation. What is so concerning to you about this particular bill?
Well, this is enormously concerning, Alex, because the ramifications are enormous. The idea that the state can kill, and it recalibrates the whole relationship between the state and the citizen. And whilst many people, I want to say this, are very well-intentioned and compassionate and are genuine in their concern for suffering, nowhere in the legislation does it talk about suffering. And what we've seen in the last few years, how Together was formed, was out of lockdowns, born from lockdowns and impositions. We've seen that do not resuscitates were imposed on people without consent, families and individuals. We've seen the treatment of many vulnerable people and others, all in the language of taking care for us. We've also seen that in Canada and elsewhere, even when there were safeguards, and bear in mind in this third reading now, all the safeguards have gone that were in place. When there were safeguards, there's a slippery slope, and often they go once they're implemented, and many more are killed. We should call it what it is, the ability for the state to kill people and have a much bigger debate with the public about this, not 15 hours just for MPs. We think we can win this. We think everyone should let their MPs hear from them. Because this would change forever the relationship. And bear in mind, even if you love this government, and I must say Diane Abbott has been brilliant on this issue in Labour, but even if you love this government, it won't necessarily be this government. It'll be many more that will be in place, and who knows what will happen. And from every conversation from the resources, beds, bed dodgers, coffin dodgers, net zero, too many people in the planet, they're a burden. There's a real problem culturally with our view of many things in relationship to people. It doesn't take a genius to think that a bean counter and an assessor and a hospital trust will look at this, and then they've got a situation where they say, well, this is an option here. And who knows what 6 months to live means, because we've seen so many living for years that have been given that. We need to stop this. At least if you're against this bill, let's get this stopped and then force a bigger discussion with everyone in public.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I echo your sentiments entirely. And do you know what? You know, some people listening might have found the language Alan just used there as pretty uncouth, saying, let's say what this is. It is state-sanctioned killing. But actually, I think it's very important, as much as I have empathy with people who really want to see this go through, and I've explained from my own personal position, we do need to have grown-up language. We cannot just talk about it as dignity in dying and make it sound all cuddly and nice. And I remember when there was a huge advertising campaign on the Westminster Tube, and it was just all these pictures of people having pillow fights and gleefully running around and, yay, my final days are so wonderful. And I'm like, that isn't that's not an accurate portrayal of what we're dealing with right now. And it is fundamentally changing the relationship for the first time in a very long time that the state would essentially be sanctioning killing somebody. Now, that might be somebody killing themselves with a particular prescribed medication. And even though there are checks and balances, it is something that we don't have anymore. We don't have capital punishment. We don't have euthanasia. And unless we're prepared to use grown-up language about this, rather than shroud it in the sort of, you know, be kind vocabulary that doesn't actually get to the truth of the matter, I worry that this is such an important subject. We've got to be grown up. We've got to use the right words. We've got to listen to all sides of the argument. We've got to take our time and not rush this through, because what we are dealing with here is so big. It's about whether people live or die. Thank you ever so much, Alan Miller. Right before we go to the break, this is your chance to find out how you could win a weekend away in the gorgeous and sunny city of Munich in May to watch the biggest game in football. It is the Champions League final. And do all that with 5k as well. Why wouldn't you want to? This is how.
Win a once-in-a-lifetime trip to watch the Champions League final live. Go to talksport.com/win for your chance to embark on the ultimate odyssey of football ecstasy. With 2 tickets to the Champions League final live at the iconic Munich Football Arena, Germany, including flights, accommodation, and an uber-massive $5,000 in your hand.
How about that?
Enter online now at talksport.com/win. Terms and conditions apply. Achtung, baby.
18 plus, UK, excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win all of that, simply text the word football to 83338 by the 16th of May at 11 p.m. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission, or send your name and number by post to Champions League Final Competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 21st of May. This is a TalkSport limited competition run on TalkSport Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Across the UK, on DAB+, On your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back to the show. I'm going to be joined now by a brilliant friend of mine, Mr. Brian Monteith, otherwise known as Mr. Whippy of old, because he used to be the whip in the Brexit Party when we all sat together in the European Parliament. Hello, good afternoon to you, Brian. Always a pleasure to have your company. Oh, we can't hear Brian. Brian, are you on mute, my love? Have we got him back?
Anymore.
How are you? Yeah, we all do it. I literally was having a full-blown conversation with someone the other day and my cheek had put mute on my phone and I was waffling on. No idea they couldn't hear me. So Keir Starmer thinks that he can have a brilliant reset with the EU, that it will make everything light and sunshine and he's not going to betray Brexit at all. But you can't, I mean, that doesn't work, does it? There's no such thing as having a closer relationship with the EU that doesn't give away that hard-earned sovereignty that we fought for.
Well, that's perfectly correct, because you can only have a relationship with the EU on the EU's terms. It's a one-way street. And what we will see is all sorts of explanations of working down to the wire, burning the midnight oil. It's been really tough negotiations. But, you know, we've managed to get a new relationship that's going to improve things brilliantly. It's all choreographed. Most of it has already been sorted out. And the main thing for the EU is defence and security. They want to tie us in knots so that our armed forces are there to help them and they can access our intelligence, our skills and knowledge in military construction and engineering.
I mean, some people might say, well, look at the peril going on right now in the world and the fact that Europe has been absolutely woeful when it comes to the defence of its own realms, and perhaps better cooperation is a good thing.
Well, I just go back to before the Ukraine invasion of Ukraine by Putin's Russia, and there was Boris trying to actually help Ukrainians, instructing the RAF to send armaments over to Ukraine. And what happened? The Germans wouldn't let the RAF fly through German airspace. The idea that we need to be involved with the EU when we should be working through NATO is a fallacy. We already have NATO. This is all about tying ourselves in knots. And what they will do is they will bind us in to the trade and cooperation agreement so that if we misstep in any way by saying, well, we don't really think this is the right policy, they will invoke actual trade embargoes, trade difficulties that stop us having our own sovereignty about our defence and security. They're cunning. I'll give them that.
That's the only thing they are good at doing, which is being cunning. They're not very good at running anything. But the problem is some of the most important things that people voted for, as in taking back control of our fishing, taking back control of our farming and taking back control of our borders, are potentially about to be handed away because the government has offered a 4-year deal which will allow the EU to keep their current fishing quota share, despite that being one of our very rare cards we had to play in those negotiations because they all want to come and fish in our waters. And then they're saying, well, if you want to sell food into the EU, you better follow all of our rules and regulations, just as we're starting to do trade deals with other countries around the world. And then I think the worst of the lot of them is this youth mobility scheme, which is basically freedom of movement, but with an age cap.
Well, there are some big asks that the EU wants. Certainly, the youth mobility scheme is one. Our fishing grounds is another. And it was such a pushover, is Keir Starmer, that the EU has its asks, and then it wants us to pay for them. So we've to give up our access to our fishing grounds for another 4 years. We've to actually open our doors to essentially EU youth unemployment, which is at far larger levels in places like Spain. It's over 25% compared to 14% in the UK saying is, we'll have your unemployed. How does that look when we actually have to make sure that our own young people are able to get jobs when they leave school? I tell you, it's a pushover deal, and Keir Starmer is so ideologically committed to the EU that he will give them anything they want.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And all our hard work, Brian, all our hard work undone, just like that. A flick of the pen by that idiot in number 10. Now, I hope you don't mind me putting you on the spot, but, you know, sharing is caring, right? When you're going through a hard time, you want a good friend there to help you through it. And today, one of our big stories, because Rupert's popped back up and is doing loads of media, has been about that big spat in Reform UK. As you can well imagine, Brian, it's been pretty uncomfortable for me having to cover this story. But because you, like me, know both men, have worked very closely with both men, no doubt share their political ideology for the most part, I just want to get your take on this row.
Well, speaking as a former whip for the Brexit Party, which is different, obviously, in some respects from Reform, I have to say that I think the breach is not really on policy, although I think Rupert tries to make out it is. I think the breach is in loyalty. And I think that, for me, much as I like Rupert Lowe as a person, and indeed Ben Habib as well, there have been times when they have actually opened their mouths before they've thought hard about what they should be saying in the sense of strategy, the bigger picture, beating Labour, beating the Conservatives. And, you know, Nigel's the leader and Richard Tice is the deputy. And between the two of them, I think they have got to a position of being at 30% in the polls. So why on earth, before the May elections, before a by-election, do you want to start complaining and putting Reform's prospects under threat? I can't understand that. Of course, sort out how a party's run. Of course, challenge issues on policy. But there are ways of doing it. And giving interviews to the Daily Mail, writing columns that actually take down your leader before people are going to cast their vote, and basically say, vote for anyone but Reform, I think is unforgivable for a party leader to let fly. And if I had been whip, I would have been removing the whip from Rupert Lowe.
Right, thank you for your candour, Brian. And yeah, it's fascinating to hear it because, of course, you know, when you know the people involved and when you care for the cause, as we both do, there's only so much I can say as a broadcaster, but I certainly echo many of Brian's sentiments there. If you look, like we say, the handling of this is one thing, but bringing it all the way back to where it began, you've got to have party discipline. The Tories learnt that the hard way. The Labour Party have learnt that lesson. At least there's one thing they're getting right in government, which is they're not all throwing bricks at each other. And Brian is a brilliant man. I mean, bring back Brian, bring back Mr. Whippy. He was so admired by all of us in the European Parliament, and we were a happy gaggle. We really were, all fighting for a cause, which unfortunately now Sir Keir Starmer seems to want to unravel. So there you go. That was Brian's. I'm delighted, actually, that he was so candid. I was kind of thinking Brian might go a bit difficult to say what I think. I'm going to keep my cards close to my chest. But listen, I speak to a lot of former Brexit Party MEPs, and Brian's particular take on this is not uncommon among them. Talking about that, this is going to be the final advert break before I then scuttle off for the weekend. But it's your opportunity to tell me what you think about everything we've been discussing today, whatever topic it may be. 03444 99 1000 is the number to call, standard network rate and all of that. And you can use that to send a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note. 87222 on the messages. I'm going to try and read as many out as possible and hopefully take your calls after this.
You see a video of some of these, they're all very like white middle class liberal women who are dancing away with the migrants in Calais. Like, oh, aren't these guys fun and nice? Have a nice party with them. Not caring at all, exactly as Nigel Farage said, that there'll be plenty of people there who will come into this country and then start to plan terrorist atrocities against us. We've got 40,000 people of Islamists on the active MI5 watch list. And we're not taking this as the national emergency. And as Farage, I think, rightly says on this, we're just having more of these people coming in. We must be completely suicidal to allow this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Right, this is the final chunk of the show, which means it's your chunk. Isabel's message saying, great show, Notting Hill Carnival. My daughter lives in Notting Hill every year. Starting at the beginning of August, shops and residents start boarding up their premises and taking other protective measures to safeguard their property. Throughout the carnival and on the days before and after, all parking bays are suspended. Not that you dare leave your car amongst the rabble. The filth left over takes days to clear, and the damage caused, the vandalism, is enormous. The disruption and cost to businesses and residents is considerable. My daughter leaves on the Thursday before the bank holiday weekend and does not return until the Wednesday afterwards. For 6 days of the year, the neighbourhood she lives in is a no-go area for its residents. Thanks to this so-called carnival, it should be moved to a park where it can be properly policed. Exactly. My boyfriend's mum lives in Notting Hill, and she's the same. She's scared to be in her own house. And then you come back and look at your Ring doorbell to find out half of the people there have been using your front garden to defecate in, or urinate in, or take drugs in, or sexually assault someone in. It's ridiculous. This cannot go on happening on the streets where people's businesses and their properties are affected. You wouldn't allow some sort of St George's Day hullabaloo to take place in the, streets of Ealing if people's properties are getting trashed and there's mass drug taking and violence. It'd be cancelled like that, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? Oh, 10 miles per hour, says Debbie. May as well go back to horse and trap. Yep. That's exactly what I think. Good afternoon, Alex. Excellent show as usual. Why, thank you. I try my best. Regarding 10 miles per hour, this should not be an issue for most of the illegal immigrants piling into our country, as they're used to roaring around on donkeys and horses and carts, says Warwick from Devon. I'll tell you what, though, I'm afraid to say that I think a lot of the people who have entered this country illegally and are working on the black market are going far faster than 10 miles per hour on dodgy scooters, which always have L plates on, with some sort of courier thing on the back. And I'm like, what are you delivering? Huh? So there we go. Rachel says, I love Rupert Lowe. If you're listening, Rupert, Rachel's a fan. And Luke in Bromley says, saying Reform UK is a cult is ridiculous. Rupert has hit an all-time low. I personally know members of the leadership, including Nigel, and their plans, and other high-profile people who are going to join Reform soon. Ooh, exciting times. It is not a cult. It's just a highly charged, focused and determined to make Britain great again. And Rupert has shown his true, ugly colours. Hi, Alex. Loving the show. I totally disagree with the last two callers, though that was Andrew and John from earlier. I think your thoughts on Nigel and Rupert are bang on. And Stuart in Perthshire, I'm thinking of you, Stuart, and I'll be thinking of you for days and days and days and weeks to come. So thanks for your kind words, Alex. I do genuinely have concerns about, I do believe you that you genuinely have concerns about getting the legislation right. Have a good weekend. Stuart, you're going to be in my thoughts and my prayers, my darling, because it's impossible to imagine what living with a chronic, debilitating, painful, incurable disease like MS is like, for the individual concerned, for the wider family. And yeah, I've always said I'm so torn on this legislation. I just, the Christian in me doesn't agree with it. But then, like I said, my personal experience of, my beloved uncle, I just don't know. I just don't know. OK, let's hit up the phone line, shall we, and speak to Darren, who's in Kent. Hi there, Darren.
Alex, good afternoon. I'd just like to say, I believe you're doing a fantastic job. I'm new to watching you guys, and I find your whole show amazing. The information you give out.
Oh, we do our best. Well, thank you, team behind the glass as well. I just sit here as the performing monkey. There's a whole brilliant crew of people behind me who put together this show, so praise to them indeed.
Yep, definitely. And as for Starmer, I mean, he's chucking in the channel. I don't know about going anywhere else.
You're going to end up joining Lucy Connolly in prison with language like that, Darren.
Oh, well, free holidays, isn't it, you know? PlayStation, that.
Well, going to prison. I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's as nice as sometimes it's portrayed to be. You've got to have some friends in some pretty dodgy places for it to be an okay time.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It'd be not fun, you know. They just lock people up for anything nowadays. It's crazy. I'm not getting it. Sorry, I must be a stupid person, but...
Well, you're right. I don't get it either because, do you know what really astonishes me, Darren? I'm astonished at, we Brits take too much stuff lying down. By the way, Sakir, I'm not inciting violence or insurrection, but we take way too much stuff lying down. It takes a lot to get Brits out on the street in protests. And I am amazed when people can see what's happened to Lucy Connolly. I am amazed to find a single human being who thinks that her being sentenced to prison for 31 months is just and balanced. People do argue it. I mean, I'm amazed to find anyone who thinks she should be in prison at all, let alone, debating that lengthy sentence. And I'm amazed that Britain is not responding to that. And the reason actually is because that's what it was designed to do. The whole reason people were shoved into prison, and we had the judge judification of our legal system where it was all over the television. Funny that there's like a 2-3 year waiting list if you've raped someone up to actually go to court and face the music. But if you sent a tweet, all of a sudden, not only could they have all of these trials taking place as an emergency, they put them on telebox. In fact, they weren't trials, were they? Nobody actually faced a trial because the CPS, of which the Keir Starmer used to lead, told everybody to just plead guilty and get whacked with a sentence. And yet those people who did say, I want to actually have my day in court and defend myself, the vast majority of them did not face any sort of punishment. And so you have to ask yourself, if Lucy Connolly had actually had a proper court case, if she would be in prison at all. She's not been granted visitation rights. This is a young mother of a 12-year-old who has been through something really upsetting in life, and normally that is dialed up to mitigating circumstances. If you've lost a child and then you see 3 other parents go through that horror in a really vile and brutal way, and you write something out of passion and 2 hours later you delete it. I mean, for crying out loud. That is not a 3-year jail sentence. What is wrong with this country? I'm surprised that more Brits aren't protesting this. Darren, thank you ever so much. Let's speak to Robert, who's in Hertfordshire. Hi, Robert.
Hi, Alex. I think Starmer's been really clever, and I'll tell you for why. He knows his biggest danger is the left of the party. That's all he's got to worry about is his job. Now, the only reason he can get away with the promise that he's making is telling them behind closed doors, I'm lying. It's not going to happen. Right, and he knows all these new things that he's implicated is going to take 4 or 5 years. Well, and he's already told the public that, so that's going to put him into the next election. Now, a few weeks ago, he pledged that he was going to cut the civil service jobs. I think it was 10,000. Well, this new idea that he's got, that's the job back straight away. So, because that couldn't have gone down too well with the left when he said that he was going to cut all those jobs.
Right, and the unions, in fact.
The unions. So what he's done behind closed doors, don't worry about it, I'm lying.
Do you know, it's interesting. I hadn't actually thought about this because we haven't picked up on some of these pledges. In fact, what Starmer did in his first 100 days in office is what people in politics call flood the zone. What you do is you throw out as much legislation as possible all at once, and so people don't know where to focus. And so they suddenly get up in arms about a particular thing, and they haven't noticed something else being snuck through, which then goes into statute. And if anything, he has been like a sort of hyperactive, sort of tennis ball delivery machine when it comes to creating quangos, then saying you want to cut the civil service, getting rid of NHS England. Yeah, it's so much stuff, and I'm like, have you done it yet? Is it happening?
Well, the next thing is getting us. You can see what's going to happen. He's appeasing Macron. He's trying to get us back into the EU through the back door. You know, and you can see what's going to happen. you can see what's going to happen. And there was a caller about 4 callers ago. He said a scary thing. He said we're one atrocity away from real rights. Now, I've always thought that. And the other thing, I don't think this government will ever finish its term. For whatever reason, whether the king comes in the end, fingers crossed. I can't see us having. Listen, we're not even a year in yet, and look what's happened. There's no way. I don't think hopefully they won't finish their term.
So, I mean, it is interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, like you said, they have made some pretty big proverbial see-ups, haven't they? Upset a lot of people with the disability benefits cuts, with getting rid of the winter fuel duty. They've upset the farmers. I mean, they're about to probably upset a huge number of people who voted for Brexit. But interestingly, on that one in particular, is Starmer's been one of the first prime ministers to actually do some Brexity things. Believe it or not, he signed a trade deal with India. Couldn't do that as part of the EU. He signed a sort of, pseudo trade deal with America. Couldn't do that as part of the EU. He's renationalised steel up in Scunthorpe. Couldn't do that as part of the EU. He's renationalising elements of the railways. You couldn't do that as part of the EU. He wants to usher in a swathe of extreme workers' rights when normally such Labour policy is very often a competence of, guess what? Yes, the EU. So on some level, he's one of the most Brexit prime ministers we've had since that historic vote. But normally, all in the wrong way. Robert in Hertfordshire, thank you ever so much for your call. We've had fantastic calls today, and actually even the ones that got a bit spicy and there are a few disputes. It is always good to hear everybody's view, to air them, to have a bit of a ding-dong if that's what it takes, and sometimes to have a love-in, as I'm going to do right now with Mr. Ian Collins. Or are we going to have a ding-dong?
Well, it's the only time I get to talk to a proper thoroughbred, 100% pure pedigree Islamist sympathiser. So, yes, it's great to be in here. I heard that guy. I thought, where's he going with this
It was very weird. I didn't understand where he was going with it either.
Because I thought, this is a bright chap. He sounds good.
If he wanted to go down the route of let's debate the impacts of Islam within Britain, he wouldn't find anyone better to do that with who would agree with most of what he says.
That was the sort of fundamental flaw in his entire kind of scaffolding of his argument, if you like.
Yeah.
It just sort of slightly was a bit creaky.
But then it was a bit alarming when he started sort of accusing the chairman of Reform of being an Islamist. I'm like, that words have weight.
Has he true, but has he never listened to him speak? Or is it all meant to be a ruse? Is that what I think he was alleging?
Yeah, I don't know. It was
a secret plan to